Welcome to the City of Des Moines Plan and Zoning Commission meeting, April 4th. And these are the rules and procedures for the Plan and Zoning Commission. The Plan and Zoning Commission is generally an advisory body to the City Council. The City Council will hold a public hearing and make a final decision on all matters before the Commission, other than site plans and subdivision flats, unless denials or conditional approvals are appealed. Please contact the City Clerk or the Community Development Department staff for details on council hearings. Applicants will be given 10 minutes to present their request. Proponents and then opponents from the public are then allowed to speak in that order, with each speaker allowed a maximum of 5 minutes. The applicant is then allowed 5 minutes for rebuttal. The hearing will then be closed and the commission will discuss and vote on the issue. All comments are to be germane to the issue under consideration, and speakers are to maintain a courteous manner. Items listed on the consent portion of the agenda will not individually be discussed and will be considered for approval in accordance with the recommendation of the staff report, unless an individual present or a member of the commission requests that the item be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately under the public hearing agenda. And we'll go through those one by one. The City of Des Moines is pleased to provide accommodations to individuals or groups with disabilities and encourages participation in city government. Assisted listening devices are available for meetings in this room. And to better serve you when possible, please notify the city at least 3 business days in advance at 283-4209 should special accommodations be required. Plan and Zoning Commission meetings are broadcast on Media Cable Channel 7.1 or 7.2 for customers with that service. Transportation for the City of Des Moines meetings can be scheduled to and from DART Central Station at 620 Cherry Street. To reserve your route, please call DART on-call scheduling at 283-8136. Calls for trips will be accepted up until 5 p.m. of the day prior to the meeting. And please be sure to mention in your request that you require transportation to the City of Des Moines meetings at this location. This notice is intended to comply with accessibility requirements of the Americans with Disabilities Act. All right, we have a quorum. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of our March 7th meeting? Also moved. Thank you. All those in favor of approving the minutes of the March 7th Plan and Zoning Commission meeting, please signify by raising your hand. All right. Are there any nay votes? None. Are there any abstentions? Got those? Okay. So we will go through the agenda items as listed. Item number 4, I understand, will be removed from our consent agenda. Is that correct? And placed in the public hearing. Meeting will hear this item. All right, so we'll move item number 4 from consent. Item number 7, I believe, by request of the applicant, can move to consent. Is that correct? Is the applicant present? And is that correct? You agree with the items? All right. Is there anyone, however, who wishes to hear this item? And I'll read it. It's a request from MRI 12222, located at 313 Southwest 5th for vacation of Elm Street from vacated Southwest 4th Street to Southwest 5th Street. Is there anyone who wishes to hear this item? Otherwise, it will go to consent. All right, seeing none, is there anyone on the commission who wishes to hear this item? All right, is there a motion to move item number 7 to consent? Thank you. All those in favor of moving item number 7 to our consent agenda, please signify by raising your hand. All right. Were there any no's? I didn't see anyone. Okay. All right. And it is my understanding also that item number 9, which is a request from Hubble Realty for review and approval of a site plan, edits in apartment buildings under design guidelines for multiple family residential dwellings on property located at Southwest 7th to allow for development of a 3-story, 42-unit multifamily residential dwelling. Is the applicant present? And is it correct that you are in agreement with staff recommendations and this item can be moved to consent? All right. Is there anyone in the audience, however, who wishes to hear this item? Seeing none, is there anyone on the commission who wishes to hear this item? All right. Seeing none, is there a motion to move this item to consent? Thank you. All of those in favor of moving item number 9 to our consent agenda, please signify by raising your hand. All right, thank you. So that completes the items that I'm aware of.
I need to recuse. I need to recuse on that vote.
Oh, okay. So did you get that, Tyler? All right.
10-01.
He recused on item number 9, correct? Mm-hmm. Okay. So now we're ready to vote on our no, let me go through the consent items. Item number 1 is a city-initiated request for review and recommendation regarding a proposed amendment to the site plan policies to revise the traffic analysis policy. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to hear this item? Seeing none, is there anyone on the commission who wishes to hear this item? All right, this item will remain on consent. Item number 2 is a request from River Point West for review and approval of a preliminary plat, Grays Lake Landing, Plat 1 for property located the 400 block of Southwest 11th Street to allow property to be combined into a 4.1 acre development lot. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes us to move this item from consent? All right, seeing none, is there anyone on the commission who wishes to hear this item? All right, seeing none, that will stay on consent. Item number 3 is a request from First Midwest of Iowa Corporation located at 1235 Thomas Beck Road for vacation of irregular segment of the north edge of Thomas Beck Road adjoining the subject property to mitigate off-street parking encroachments. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes us to hear this item? All right, seeing none, is there anyone on the commission who wishes to remove this item from consent? All right, so seeing none, the items for consent tonight are items number 1, 2, 3, 7, and 9. Is there a motion? All those in favor of consent items, please signify by raising your hand. Thank you. Are there any nays? And there's one.
I need to recuse on 9.
Right. There's one who's recusing on item number 9. All right. So we are now ready for our public hearing. We will begin with item number 4. This is a request from Des Moines Heritage Trust for property located at 120 East 5th Street.
Chair, members of the commission, Jason Van Essen, city planning staff. Aerial identifying the subject property on the west side of East 5th Street, south of East Court. You can see the historic depot building footprint. One response card that's being passed around.
Thank you.
Just a couple quick photographs. So that's this would be the south side of the building, 5th Street side or east facade. then looking south down 5th Street, and then along the north side of the building. This is a rezoning to allow the redevelopment as described in the agenda. I will quickly show the site sketch. This is not a site plan. It's before you today, but they did provide this so you understand their concept. So the depot building, a proposed multi-purpose event space in the back. I'll let them describe that in greater detail. What I want to focus on really is just the individual point of why we needed to remove it from the consent agenda, and just help us, focus on that, since that's the one point that the applicant has concerns about. In our staff rec, we are recommending approval. The item that there's agreement on is condition number 1, which is a prohibition of uses that are allowed in this C3B zoning district. The item number 2 is the point that we want to focus on, and that is our language of that any development of the site shall be subject to the undergrounding of all overhead utilities to the maximum extent possible. And so today, often we see the utility question come up at site plan stage, and I think we're going to see that later tonight at a site plan stage. But with this being a rezoning, we do what we can to try to have these kinds of issues and discussions at the rezoning stage up front. We have put this language in here. The applicant has done some due diligence as to the cost and impact working with Mid-Am. Often that doesn't occur until site plan stage, but they have been doing that, and that's raised some red flags for them. They also have some obstacles with regard to working with the railroad, or trying to work with the railroad that owns land to the south. I'm going to let them explain the details of that to you and why they're asking this zoning condition to be struck from the recommendation. As staff, we're recommending this. I think to us, this language leaves an open process in that it says maximum extent possible. We would anticipate that we would be looking at that closer down the road, but I think it's fair to have that discussion tonight. I'd be happy answering questions for staff.
Jason, is this language something that the staff is considering to use verbatim in the future, or is this, tell me about that.
Well, so often in the downtown, we're not dealing with a zoning change, we're dealing with site plans and the design guidelines, the downtown overlay design guidelines and the such. And so we haven't had the opportunity really to apply this language. I think this is good language moving forward on case-by-case rezonings if we are aware. If you have suggestions, Will, that, or anybody in the commission, that we use the language in a different way or not, or we'll certainly hear that, but I don't have a specific case to point back to, but it is something to think about moving forward.
So this is the beginning of a policy.
Well, every rezoning is an individual case, and we make recommendations based off of that. I think that it makes sense for us to queue this up as soon as possible in the development process. That's what we're trying to do. It's really piggyback more on the policy of the site plan review process and those policies, where we typically have had that process, and we've come before you with the site plan.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none of the applicant present. And if you would state your name and address for the record.
Madam Chair, members of the Commission, Eric Cannon, 2727 Southwest Snyder Boulevard, here on behalf of Snyder & Associates as consulting engineer. Tim Waddell is also here as the developer representative, and we have members from the design team if you guys do have any other specific questions. But as Jason said, really the question here at hand tonight is that condition 2 of the zoning, something we traditionally see at the site plan level, allows for some time to discussions with staff, but with this being a condition of zoning, we felt it was prudent to have this conversation now and bring this topic up. Really the main issue here is the site is rather hampered by the overhead electric lines, as Jason has shown. We have frontage, about 90 feet of frontage on 5th. As you can see, I don't know if we can zoom out a little bit more.
It's a credit you had in front
We have a litany of overhead electric lines. The credit union just to the north here, I would note, you will see none of their overhead electric lines along Fifth. We're taking underground as part of that development. I know that does precede us, but I know this policy has been in place for a little while. Going down on Fifth, looking south, you can see this, the depot here building. The next overhead electric line is about 120 feet south of our property. So we have about 90 feet of frontage on this site. So not only would we have to take it underneath on our frontage, but we'd have to take it down to that next pole, which is an additional 120 feet. So that does create some real challenges to the site, especially when considering the fact that the property just to the north of us, which is roughly, half a block, whatever, up to Court, that would remain. And there are service drop lines that go across Fifth Street here to the alley as the alley continues east and west. So those are all items that are a concern. This is a look here, kind of you can see the overhead lines that then continue down the alley here. One thing I would note, as part of this project, we've been in discussions with Mid-American Energy, as Jason mentioned. So really the lines in yellow there are the ones that we would be obligated to take underground from overhead based on the policy and the recommendation from staff. And as you can see, our site itself is just right here. Now, these 3 poles that are on the northern portion of the site adjacent to the alley, we've come to realize those are actually encroaching on private property. There is no easement for those poles on private property, so we've started the process with Mid-American to very nicely ask them to get off private property. So they will need to deal with the city as far as removing those poles. They've talked as though they'll just put them in the alley. I don't know if the city's going to support that or not based on this policy. I doubt they will, but that is really a Mid-American issue, I guess, is the position we've taken on that stance. So really the concern we've got here is the frontage on Fifth. Again, this site has rather limited frontage on it. Part of those discussions with Mid-American Energy is the price tag for this is $250,000. As you guys know, Des Moines Heritage Trust is a nonprofit. They're not a developer. They're not here with a bunch of apartments and a bunch of rentals and a bunch of revenue. So it's a little bit different business model than I think you guys are traditionally used to seeing. So that is something I think we also consider as a hardship to the site when this policy is trying to be enforced within this project. So happy to answer you guys' questions, but obviously with this being a condition of zoning, we wanted to have this opportunity to have the dialogue and ask you guys for your consideration on this waiver.
All right, thank you. Any questions, Commission? I do not see any questions. So we'll just see if you need to come back.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. So at this point, is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak on behalf of this proposal? All right, seeing none, is there anyone who wishes to has concerns or is in opposition to the proposal? All right, seeing none, then there's really not an opportunity for the applicant to return unless there's anything else that he wishes to bring up with us. So I will close the public hearing, and Commission, what is your pleasure?
Mike, can I just ask a question? So we mentioned that the credit union lines would remain. Do we have any sense of, like, when that was approved, do we know if we had a stipulation that they would get undergrounded when we undergrounded nearby ones?
I believe it was over 10 years ago, so I don't know. The only difference, a difference between this project and that one is that this project also did receive CDBG funding for the acquisition of the property. So, there are some public dollars in this project as well. So.
Thanks.
Well,
I'm struck by the fact that the society has actually taken on this project. This has been going on for a long, long time, and for all intents and purposes, the building could have been blitzed out quite a few years ago. So I think that the society or the trust has a lot of good that's done for the city. And another point for me is the fact that this is an industrial area, or at least it's by the railroad, and it is an industrial area. And quite frankly, the fact that these power pools are there is kind of typical of what an industrial area would be in the first place. And then the final thing, to my mind, is that working with a railroad is a very difficult thing to do. So I think in three different ways that giving them some relief on this business with the overhead lines is in order. So I'll move staff recommendation except for number 2.
Just want to delete it? Well, is your preference to delete?
Yes.
Item number 2, all right. So it's been moved that the item will read as follows. Part A is the staff recommends that the proposed rezoning to C3B district be found in conformance with the planned Des Moines design, creating our tomorrow plan. And Part B, which probably we should separate these, right? Part B is staff recommends that the subject property be rezoned M1 Light Industrial District to C3B Central Business Mixed Use District with subject to the following conditions, which are outlined in number 1A through L. And number 2 has been deleted. Any questions about the motion? And we probably should vote on them separately.
No,
it's okay. Okay. All right. All right. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by raising your hand. Got it? Thank you. Were there any nays? We recorded that. Okay, thank you. Thank you. We're now moving on to item number 5. Item number 5 is a request from Bell Avenue Properties for the following property located at 6230 Scout Trail. The action required is a review and approval of a preliminary plat, Airport Industrial Park Plat 3, to define 27.12 acre development parcel for previous outlots X and Y in the Airport Industrial Park Plat 2, provided turnaround right-of-way for Scout Trail and to provide right-of-way to realign Southwest McKinley. And B, to remove and approval of a site plan Waldinger headquarters in accordance with conditions of ordinance number 5, 15, is it 15.68?
15,683.
It is 15,683 to allow for development of a corporate headquarters building with 2 stories of office space totaling 90,000 square feet and 113,000 square foot main level production area.
Chair, members of the commission, Jason Van Essen, city planning staff. I think I can hear myself talk now, so we must got the volume fixed. That's good. This item was continued. This is the subject property highlighted on this map. So you saw this a month ago. That was our last meeting due to the holiday for spring break. And since that time, part of the reason it was continued was, as a commission, you asked the applicant to take a pause and meet once again with the neighbors and make sure there weren't any additional things that could be resolved, talked about. They'd had some previous discussions, but there seemed like maybe there was some new information that was being presented at the last meeting. So that did occur. They met with neighbors. Mike Ludwig was in attendance, and so if we have questions about that specifically, we can certainly go into that. Just to quickly remind everybody, in your packet you have the site plan from the last go around. This is the south edge of the property, so you can see the in highlighted fashion shows some of the additional landscaping berm features that were discussed at the last meeting. And I won't go into a lot of detail on that, just to respect everybody's time. And then this is the northern half of the property. Talked a little bit about the storage area and the screening over here. There's the long landscaped berm with an easement along the eastern perimeter. It was discussed at the last meeting. Parking areas to the north along 63rd. Staff, we appreciate the time that the applicant has spent visiting with us and then also with neighbors and making changes. We believe we're getting where we need to be on a landscaping buffering standpoint. We still are asking for the trail to be installed with the project. That's a point of difference with the applicant. They, as previously discussed, they're asking for a deferral of that. I'll let them speak to that, but we haven't changed from that position. I'll just go ahead and read the staff recommendation. As far as the conditions go, we are recommending approval of the plat and the site plan subject to compliance with all administrative review comments by the Permit and Development Center at standard language. Provision of a note on the site plan to specify minimum 22 gauge thickness metal for any metal panels, and that landscaping, bollards or curbing are required for metal panels, materials located less than 4 feet from grades, durability concern. Provision of the 10-foot trail and street tree landscaping space 30 feet apart along Iowa Highway 28. To discuss, that's the trail on 63rd. Provision of any right-of-way easement on the preliminary plat is determined necessary for the future extension of Scott Trail in accordance with MOVE DSM plan. This is MOVE DSM's, the city's transportation plan that was adopted relatively recently. Scout Trail is to the north. We've been working with the applicant and our engineering staff in alignment that how Scott Trail would come through their property and then extend on to the east. The areas highlighted in yellow are the areas on the subject property that would need to be reserved in an easement form for future right-of-way dedication. And then our last condition is revision of the landscaping plan to provide a moderate amount of base landscape material distributed around the outside of the proposed fence storage area would be to the east of the building. Additionally, with regard to neighborhood input regarding the proposed southern screening berm, staff would consider substitutions of evergreen species for proposed overstory and ornamental trees plantings in accordance with the substitution allowances in the city's landscape standards. And so in the body of the report, we talked about the concern about the different heights and the need to screen at different heights of different plant materials. The landscaping standard allows you to substitute material types up to 30%. We're supportive of accomplishing that. We just wanted to make sure that was put out there. So happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Jason? All right, seeing none, applicant present.
Guy Gast, the Waldinger Corporation, 2601 Bell Avenue.
Vitus Baring, SVPA Architects, 1466 28th Street, West Des Moines.
Mike Anthony, Shive Hattery, 4125 West Town Parkway, West Des Moines.
So you recall that this was continued primarily to allow us to meet with the neighbors and get some additional input. And we've tried to do that. I think we've made numerous modifications to the landscape plan, and I trust the neighbors will comment. I know Nick and I have talked. There is one illustration of some trees that's now on Old McKinley. They're fairly incidental in the scheme of things, and just to kind of convey our intent there is that it's easy for us to slide those trees up to the north. I don't really want to dwell on changing the site plan tonight, but I have no problem with the concept of shifting those. I think I'll put this. It's a fairly small little patch of trees, and I know this came up at the neighborhood meeting last Wednesday. I think it's probably an oversight that we didn't get that after discussion, Nick, recorded on the drawings, but the concept is simply to move those slightly into the median so that he has an option of potentially acquiring this piece of ground for his drive. So that a minor accommodation, more in the spirit of trying to get along and make sure things work. Mike, do you want to comment on? We had a couple of questions that related to the discharge of water from the detention pond to the east neighbor. So I'll let Mike Anthony from Shive comment on those.
So this representation shows it. We were able to accommodate Mike Knapp's request. We modified the pond. We're going to bore the pipe underneath the berm. There still is 3 trees, deciduous trees on the lower side of the berm that will be disturbed by the grading effort. And we are installing 12 trees in this area right here on the berm, 8 of them being coniferous, 4 of them being deciduous in mitigation of those trees. So I hope that we met his expectations there as far as, accommodating as much as possible to preserve the conservation easement. Preserve his easement as well as adding a 75-foot conservation easement to that entire buffer yard along that east wall.
So I think on a couple of the other items there was, we will take minor exception. I think the accommodation of the 22 gauge panel construction we've dealt with. I think staff will confirm that. The compliance with item 1, which is permit and review, is fine. I want to clarify something that we've continued to say. We're supportive of the regional trail system. We think it would be a valuable amenity to our employees as well. Our reservation about and our request to defer the trail construction is that was a part of a regional plan developed in last fall. Our concern is simply there hasn't been any plan or a discussion of how that trail will tie together along the Highway 28 segments or get across the river. So from our perspective, maybe it's our engineering nature, is to say it would appear that there should be some discussion with the utilities, the waterworks, the other parties of interest, and the adjacent landowners, figure out just exactly where is it going to go so we can do something with some integrity. And what we've offered to do is either bond or otherwise assure the city of our commitment to participate in the process. It just doesn't, to us, feel logical to construct a trail without a plan. So it's not, as some people have portrayed it, a rejection of trail systems. We're totally enthused about the trail, just like planning and zoning to vote that we can defer it until a time when there's something tangible to build. There's another request from staff, and this has to do with the right-of-way. And we have talked to staff. The Scout Trail easement, which, yeah, that one's fine. We really have no reservations about cooperating with the city on that. I've made it clear to staff that we're not particularly interested in building Scout Trail or of any assessments that might be attached to that, because I believe this came up last week. It's not an overwhelming issue for us to grant an easement for the small shaded areas. It's probably a little more challenging. You have to deal with the fact that that road now crosses the Scouts' property in virtually every segment and then moves to Knapp's property to the east. So I would put a qualification that it's not stated, I guess, in the item, but we are certainly willing to work with staff on a future roadway system. As to landscaping of the outdoor storage, I think at least we hoped it was pretty clear that we've substantially augmented First of all, we've changed this. This was a request of staff in the last session that we replace the outdoor storage fence and landscaping, which was permitted by the comments they'd attached to us originally, asked us to return to P&Z. At their request, we've replaced the outdoor fence and landscaping with a 10-foot architectural metal panel system, and we've additionally landscaped it as a buffer for the east neighbor. It feels to us that adding any other landscaping, especially as the grade falls behind it, with the berm and trees that are there, is unnecessary. It's not a very specific statement. It simply says plant more stuff, and what we'd ask is that we've probably tried to accommodate by moving more stuff around the neighbors facing exposure. So I think that's pretty much the sum of it.
So, Mr. Guest, okay, questions for Mr. Guest? All right, seeing none, we will see if there are any other questions in the audience. Thank you. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak in favor of this application? All right, is there anyone who has concerns or questions about the application?
I'm Nick Van Patten at 6020 Southwest McKinley Avenue, and I was just going on what we were saying. We're in talks here, and I was just going to show where on, because everything was submitted by Chuck Bishop, who I hired as, where's the X on here? I'm trying to get that so you can see. Oh, here we go. Here we go. And it's not the very best, but here's my house here, and what we're talking about is, like you said, moving the trees. This roadway, I'd like to attain that roadway part, that right there that they're going to be taking out in front of my property, moving those trees over, and that's what we're working on. And we've been working with Ryan and so forth with Waldinger. So I just wanted to reiterate that too. So, all right.
So you're just affirming that?
Yeah, I was just affirming all that,
okay,
so you guys understand. So thank you.
I appreciate that, Mr. Van Patten. Yeah. Thank you. Anyone else?
My name is Walter Githens. I'm at 320 Southwest 6th Street, and I just wanted to say that the bike trail that they're talking about, recently we had a bike trail where they made some accommodations and said that they weren't going to do something, and then they didn't. So I just want to make sure that since we're giving them, I think you're giving them some money for this relocation of the whole site. We need to make sure they build that bike trail. The floods that we've had, it's limited the trail access that we have, and that would be a good one to create. So thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Yes.
Hi, Amy Poussin Noonan, 15153 Summit Drive in Clive. I'm the president of the Des Moines Cycle Club. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak on behalf of the cycling community of Des Moines. We have a very healthy community. We appreciate that they are willing to put the trail in the future. I understand their concerns about lack of a current plan. However, to echo the comments before mine, there have been instances where, not necessarily the city of Des Moines, but in West Des Moines, promises have been made or commitments have been made that aren't followed through or are changed later. So this section of trail that needs to be built is really an advantage to connecting the parts of Des Moines north of the Raccoon River to the parts of Des Moines south of the Raccoon River. Right now, with flooding, and in the past with flooding, there is no good connection for bike trails or bike lanes between the north and north part, areas north of the Raccoon River and areas south of the Raccoon River. Even if you take bike trails all the way to downtown, some of those are underwater or have been underwater in recent weeks, and you are not able to access the south side of the Raccoon River. That's our main concern, is that there were some misconceptions due to lack of information to the cycling community. We just would prefer that the building occur at the development.
Any questions? Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Mr. Knapp.
My name is Mike Knapp. I live at 5935 Southwest McKinley. I've talked a few times. My daughter watched the video and said, "You repeat yourself too many times." So, well, I'm going to try to get through the points and then wrap up. My first concern is the extension of Boy Scout Trail. I have land to the east that I would like to move forward to development, attempted to meet with staff and try to identify. My preference is to go residential development. There are some hurdles that have to be gone through in order to accomplish that, and I think it'll be kind of an uphill battle. Here is a diagram that Jerry Oliver prepared for me for the potential of a residential development, which would include the extension of Boy Scout Trail on through the North 40. He tells me that in order to have a viable product for sale, that it should be there. The experience I've had currently working with the neighbor to the north, his name is Dan Cruz, with his property, is going to call for the extension of Watrous. And I know that with the extension of Watrous, the city was asking, or staff, I'm not sure who, for giving the right-of-way and also bonding for the improvement. My question would be of Waldinger as well as the Boy Scouts. I fully intend and have said before, as Scout Trail enters my property, I'm assuming that would be a development cost that would be borne by me. The thing that I'm concerned about is that I understand I would be doing that, but how does it ever get out to Highway 28? Because I can't foresee the Boy Scouts having a motivation to do it. Guy has expressed just now that they have no interest in doing it. So I'm kind of wondering what the solution for that is. And is the creation of this new division with the Boy Scouts actually development that requires the giving of an easement and the bonding? So that's my first concern, is that I don't want to end up having to, as a part of my development, build a road that basically goes nowhere. The second piece is related to the buffering that is occurring between my home and the Waldinger project. And I think, to put it into perspective, the yellow that you look at there was the original proposition from Waldinger for their headquarters. And over time, that has changed. And I think to their benefit, as the city gave up the right-of-way for Veterans Parkway and being able to incorporate that into a total development, works very much to their advantage, and I think that's great. But it also moves the development of what was proposed initially much closer to the neighbors. Waldinger made some accommodations that I very much appreciate, not intruding onto a buffer that now exists between the two properties, leaving trees there, and boring for their water relief. The addition, though, of the trees, unfortunately, the way that the land lies, and you can see, I don't know the gradients as you go through the topography, but most of the added trees are going to be on the downhill side of the berm and on the downhill side of the Waldinger property. So a 15-foot tree, I don't know if you can zoom into this, but this is my front porch with me standing there. This is my driveway. These are the trees that I planted. These are the trees that Waldinger is intending to put in. The difference that you don't realize immediately is that that's a man standing there, and I don't know if he's 5 feet or 6 feet, but that's, I think, the size of the stock that is intended to go there. So as you can see, there is good relief from the storage area, but as you go north of the storage area, what that does is give me a direct view from my home at their overhead door, which is, I don't remember, it was 12 feet or 14. I'm not sure how tall the door is. But if one of two things, and Guy and I, we had a conversation, and it was very accommodating, and unfortunately he blew out a tire in front of the airport, dropping his daughter off for a trip to Mexico, and was in a get-and-go parking lot waiting for rescue as we talked. But there were two things that we did talk about, and that was perhaps the opportunity of moving the storage lot further to the north, which would then give site relief immediately to the overhead door, or perhaps extending the wall that would be built around the storage area 70 feet or 50 feet or some distance to the north, that would then immediately cover the overhead door as viewed from my front door. So I guess I would like to see that happen if it can, whether it's the shifting of the storage lot or the addition of a few feet of additional fence that would, you know, obviously at some point in time those trees will give relief. The difficulty is it's a 6-foot tree on a downhill slope that is, you know, frankly, I'll be quite aged by the time those trees block the view.
Thank you, Mr. Knapp.
And I'm not repeating myself, I hope.
Not so far. You've done good.
Any questions?
I don't see any. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak? All right, Mr. Gass, would you like to give an opportunity maybe to address some of the points that were raised?
Yeah, I think Mike was very good at taking advantage of me while I was sitting in the parking lot at 5 a.m. But I have to admit that we had the discussion. My consultants kind of did remind me that there's a couple challenges for us in there you go, in moving stuff. And one of the challenges is this outdoor storage yard. If you draw the line from the Boy Scouts land that we acquired, which is this triangle here, that's C2. So they have pointed out that I'm not permitted to move the darn thing over onto the C2 ground because we'd be in violation of the zoning restrictions. So we've tried to do the best we can with landscaping effectively. This drawing is, if you can zoom in just a little bit, I think, I think Mike's depiction of this lines of sight in the plantings is accurate. We do have to depend on trees to grow. We can certainly control some of those that are 6 feet tall or 8 feet tall or 10 if we can do that. But partly we're planting trees on the downhill slope of the berm because that's the side we have. Well, we own the ground technically, but the easement is his. That line of sight from that he showed you earlier is from this point to the building up here. And so we have done what we can to try and, without moving this building over, or this outdoor storage, to make sure we've got as dense a planting both in the berm and with understory and infill. And certainly, as we tried to do with Nick, we can try and figure out how to get those darn things to be bigger and taller. Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
The other point too is we did create a bench up here on the upper side, so there is a pretty good gradient as Mike referred to, but then we did widen the flattened area that is adjacent to the concrete in order to put those trees on, so they are on the highest side of the slope in order to protect that view of those overhead doors. Additional to that, his front doorstep is about 3.5 football fields away. So what isn't reflected in these line of sights is the size of things once you get that far away and what that perspective looks like and the size of those overhead doors compared to a 6-foot tree and the massive trees that we're putting there. So it's just something to, you know, for the P&Z Council in order to take into account.
And one last thing, I understand the concern about Scout Trail, but the reality is we haven't had any dialogue at all with the city about Scout Trail. It came up last week, and we're certainly willing to. I think the question would be, had we not bought this small triangle of ground from the Boy Scouts, this would all be Boy Scouts ground across which that trail would have to go. So it's going to be something to deal with the Boy Scouts in any event, because they own the land. We own but a small sliver of it. So our position with staff was, at the 12th hour, as we try to break ground on a new building, it seemed unreasonable to impose an obligation to build Scouts Trail, which hadn't been part of the process. So, Mike, I'm not really contending over that. I know I can see how valuable it would be to you, but it is questionable that at the 12th hour we can commit to build a road.
Madam.
I think, Mike, did you want to comment now? Or?
Well, if I could, just real
Unless
quickly.
your question relates to this. Mike said he had some comments.
No, I was going to ask about your bonding scheme. Could you tell us more about that?
You mean on the trail segment?
Yes.
Well, we've just assumed that there's a way to provide the city with some sort of financial insurance, whether it's through a bond, as we will have to do for the public improvements work, or whether it's through some waiver of the right of appeal on assessment. I mean, it feels to me like the bigger issue for us is to create some meaningful plan so that the trail that we hope would be used by our employees and everyone else who wants to get from the other side of the river up the road will be available. It's just, you know, my imagination says that you could also build it on the other side of the road, but that wouldn't be Des Moines' problem. There are some difficulties getting it in that location because of where the utilities and where the easements are for waterworks and others. And I think we've had those discussions with staff too. We're willing to work with them.
Mike, did you have a comment?
Yeah, so regarding Scout Trail, the council's already approved a development agreement for this project, and they did not require Scout Trail to be constructed as part of that development agreement. The Scout Trail extension is shown in the MOVE DSM transportation plan that the council approved just in the last 6 months. So obviously, one of two things would have to happen. Either if development occurred, and again, they've already not required it as part of the development agreement on the Waldinger property. I'm not aware that the Scouts are proposing any expansion onto their property. So we would want to work with those entities on acquisition of right-of-way, either through dedication or easement, or like say with this plat, where we'd be asking for that right-of-way to be dedicated. But I think that, you know, I don't speak for the council or future councils, but in the discussion about the roadway network in this area without the Southeast Connector going through, there's a study that's going to happen about these additional roadway networks that need to be constructed in the area. And at least in the industrial portions of the property, this property is in an urban renewal district that generates TIF, which can be used for building public infrastructure within the boundaries of the urban renewal area. Basically, what we've said to date is that industrial development, there might be assistance in building the network for industrial development because of the tax generation that's from it. I don't believe there would be TIF available for residential. And so we've even discussed in the past with Mr. Knapp that if, I know his intent is for residential development, we said if there was industrial, there'd be an opportunity to extend that urban renewal plan in the future and possibly assist with some infrastructure if the council agreed to that. But I would not expect that for residential. And so as far as the concern about how this gets connected from existing Scout Trail to the Knapp property, I would assume there'd be city participation in the future, but that would be a future council decision on that. So at this point, we feel comfortable in asking for an easement to be dedicated, and that there was not an obligation on Waldinger's part as part of their development agreement with the city to construct the Scout Trail. We're just asking for the right-of-way easement to be dedicated, and we will piece together right-of-way and figure out a plan for how to get the gap constructed, just like we do all over the city when there are gaps. So, thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Gass? All right, seeing none, thank you very much. I'm going to close the public hearing. Commission, what is your pleasure?
I'll move staff. As I said in the last one, I think it makes sense to build the bike trail. I feel like if we don't put these things in when we're doing the redevelopment, then the next one down the line will just point out and say there's no trail there. Why do we have to put it in? Eventually, you never get it built. And I think this is actually an important place for a trail because it does provide connectivity. It isn't just sort of out in the middle of nowhere. It provides connectivity, at least to some extent, and it's on the side of a relatively busy road that people bike on. And so it provides safety as well. So that's why I'm moving staff without removing provision 4.
All right, so the motion is Parts A and B, staff recommends approval of the submitted preliminary plat and site plan subject to compliance with the following conditions. Compliance with all administrative review comments by the Permit and Development Center, provision of a note on the site plan to specify the minimum 22 gauge thickness metal for any metal panels, and that landscaping, curing, and bollards are required where metal panel material is located less than 4 feet from grade. Number 3 was the provision of the 10-foot trail and the tree street landscaping spaced every 30 feet along Highway 28 frontage of the property as is described in the Move Des Moines plan, and provision of any right-of-way easement on the preliminary plat is determined necessary for future extension of Scout Trail in accordance with the Move Des Moines plan. And number 5 was the revision of the landscaping plan to provide a moderate amount of base landscaping material distributed around the outside of the proposed fenced outdoor storage area, and additionally with regard to the neighborhood input regarding the proposed southern screening berm. Staff would of course consider substitutions of evergreen species for proposed overstory and ornamental tree plantings in accordance with substitution allowances in the approved landscaping standards and the site plan policies. Are there any questions about the motion? Yes, great.
I'd like to offer a friendly amendment for you to consider. If number 3 could be revised to set a bond to do the bike trail, also with a trigger, and I don't know if I'm setting a precedent, but some kind of trigger that when the first property on that side of the road is required to do one, that would kick in too at that time, that they would need to do it at that time. I don't know if that's possible, but.
Right, I'm not going to accept that amendment because I feel that the trail, I think it's a complicated thing to do it that way, and I also feel like the trail actually provides value now. It's not just providing value once other things are done. So that's why I'm not going to accept that amendment.
Good. Any other questions about the motion as it is? All right, seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by raising your hand. Okay, nay votes.
Could I just make a comment?
Sure.
I mean, just for the purpose of the audience, that, you know, these strategic plans, Plan DSM, Move DSM, this kind of conversation we've had about sidewalks. You know, that's what's coming to my mind. So, you know, we're really trying to connect the city both with sidewalks and bike trails, and so I think that's why it's important, and it is easy to put that off, and we really are trying to stand strong and so everybody benefits. So,
thank you, Jan. All right, that motion passes. Well, Mr. Guest, is it related to our previous vote? Because actually we're done debating it.
to the remark about sidewalks.
Okay.
There are no sidewalks. I mean, you don't have sidewalks on the other developed properties along that road. So it is a bit, it is a bit inconsistent in terms of the city's approach to development to say sidewalks. I want to be clear because there are a lot of people listening that there are no sidewalks continuing to the north. So it does seem unusual to impose an obligation on one builder that has only now been amended.
Yeah, well, maybe it's not a good example, but that was what I was thinking about.
We're just saying to be.
It does make it sound as though the commitment to sidewalks is universal. It has not been universal along Highway 28.
All right, thank you. And we're ready for item number 6. This is a request from All Lines Painting to appeal an administrative denial of a site plan, All Lines Painting, on property located at 1524 Vermont Street to allow development of a 4,230 square foot industrial building with paved off-street parking and loading. The developer is appealing the requirements of the installation of a 5-foot wide public sidewalk, go Jan, along with adjoining Vermont Street with the project.
Chair, members of the commission, Jason Van Essen, city planning staff. Aerial identifying the subject property on the west side of Vermont Street. Just the notice map, we didn't have any cards to pass around. Zoom out a little bit here. Quick photograph of the property. It's north of University, east of 2nd Avenue, Central Place. Then a site sketch would have been included in your packet with some additional information showing the general configuration of the site. Really just straightforward. This is administrative site plan. We're here because there was a denial at the staff level. They're appealing your decision. There is a process in the ordinance to allow for appeals of administrative decisions. It requires at least 8 commissioners to vote in favor of overturning an administrative decision. We've talked about MOVE DSM, the city's transportation plan, already tonight, recently adopted in the past several months. As part of that, that plan identifies priority level 1 and 2 sidewalks. It identifies a lot of different things, but what's specific to this site is priority sidewalks, and the council directive as part of that plan's adoption that staff should not be waiving sidewalk requirements for priority 1 and 2 sidewalks as identified within that plan. This is a priority 2 sidewalk, and so we are not willing as staff to, we're here to follow the policy that's been adopted for us by council. So we are recommending that you deny the waiver request that the sidewalk not be installed. We do have some language if you have some interest in approving something. We did offer up a little bit of language you could use for a deferral. I can show that to you. In essence, I think the thing that look at the most would be number 2 about the requiring the sidewalk by May 3rd of 2021. But happy to answer any questions.
What was that second sentence after that?
Oh, sure. That should you be inclined, should the commission be inclined to grant the deferral, staff would recommend the deferral be subject to the following: the provision of a 5-foot public sidewalk along the entire length of the street frontage. That's just being clarifying the situation. 2 is that the sidewalk specified in condition 1 shall be constructed no later than May 3rd of 2021. A final CO will be issued after installation of the sidewalk, and then compliance with all administrative review. This is kind of our catch-all.
Okay.
So.
Any questions for Jason?
Thank you.
All right, seeing none. So is our applicant with us? Are we expecting?
Susan, have you seen the applicant?
I have not. We were not contacted today to advise us of an absence.
Okay. So, assuming that the applicant is aware that this was on the agenda tonight, correct? And didn't.
Yeah, they've requested that this come before you as an appeal. They were mailed the staff report and the agenda last week. I'm not aware that we've received any contact communication from them that they weren't going to be able to attend.
Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak in favor of the applicant's proposal? Seeing none, is there anyone who wishes to speak with concerns? All right, seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Yes, ma'am.
I'll move staff.
As written?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
I mean,
So clarifying, you're moving for denial or you're moving for deferral?
I'm moving that we recommend denial.
Any questions about the motion?
I only have one. If we concur with if we deny the appeal, will that be forwarded to council or would the appeal be final?
The appeal's final unless the applicant within 30 days appeals to council.
Thank you. All right, there's a motion on the floor that we approve staff recommendation for denial of the site plan based on finding that the waiver of a priority level 2 sidewalk is contradictory to the implementation of Move Des Moines, which is our city's transportation master plan. All those in favor of that motion, please signify by raising your hand. All right. Are there any? Everyone voted. Okay. We are now ready for item number 8. This is a request from We Can Build It for property located at 4801 Franklin Avenue. And number 1, for a determination as to whether proposed rezoning is in conformance with the existing Plan Des Moines. Number 2, that the amendment to Plan Des Moines future land use classification from neighborhood mixed use within a neighborhood node to community mixed use within a neighborhood node. Number 3, rezoning from limited C1 neighborhood commercial district to a PUD planned unit development. And number D, or letter D, approval of Franklin Junior High PUD conceptual plan to allow for a mixed-use renovation of the existing 213,269 square foot school and church building for uses that could include a private elementary intermediate school, event space rental within the existing gymnasium, small and large auditoriums, and within additional area of the building, a 30 guest room boutique hotel, professional office and retail space, a restaurant with outdoor seating and detached accessory kitchen, up to 5 separate taverns, a craft brewery with production for on-site consumption, and a pop-up screen drive-in theater for periodic use within the existing North Off-Street parking lot. I don't think I've ever read a sentence that long before.
Well, something to shoot for next time, right?
Yes. Another history note for me, right?
Making history tonight. Chair, members of the commission, Jason Van Ness and the city planning staff. Before I get started with the presentation, we were a little late in getting the sign-out sheet up. So I know we have a lot of folks that are here tonight and interested in this item, and I just want to convey that it helps us. We're required to track speakers for the public record. So if they could sign in before they speak, you can do so at any point. It can be after you speak. It just helps us make sure that we're spelling your name right and that sort of thing. So I appreciate people's help. The aerial showing the subject property is before you on the screen. It's on the northwest corner of Franklin and 48th Street. It's been a school originally, it's been a church, it's been a religious school over the years, and we've talked about that in the plan, or excuse me, in the staff report, and I'm sure the applicant will talk about it a little bit more tonight as well. This is the response map. There are response cards, emails, letters are being passed around to you. This map is for us to track responses within that 200 to 250 foot radius that's highlighted there. I just want to assure everybody that all the communication that we've received is actually being passed around to you, but for the purposes of tracking the state mandated notice process and keep tracking the for and against. That's what this map is for. So it's not to diminish any other input that we receive, but I just want to clarify that. This is the building, would be the south and east corner looking up 48th Street. This is at the north end of the property, so 48th Street is on this side, looking back into the parking lot to the south towards the building. That same general location in the northern parking lot, looking westward towards the apartment complex to the west. Franklin Avenue, so this is the southern perimeter of the property, looking east down the street. Western end of the property. And then the 49th Street, this is the west edge of the property, just quickly kind of back in this area around the edge of the apartments and the park to the north. And then looking back into the site. I usually try not to show that many pictures, but it's a big site, so I thought it was important to do so. To break this up and for us to think about what it is we're doing tonight, I'm going to talk first about the city's comprehensive plan, because parts A and B of the requested actions refer to that, and so I think it would be best to cover that and then get into a little more of the details of the project specific. So, as noted in the agenda, we are recommending staff that the future land use map designation be changed from neighborhood mixed use within a neighborhood node to community mixed use within a neighborhood node. So it does require as staff a change on that designation. It is one thing that we did note in the staff report is that it is in a node, and the other thing that we look at, so often we're here and we talk specifically about the map and what the shade of the color and what that correlates to on the future land use map, which is just really one component of the city's comprehensive plan. It's a full booklet level document with a lot of different goals that are written or text, verbal kind of goals, less graphic in nature. And so we also look at those and when we write these staff recommendations and evaluate changes to the future land use map and then also rezoning requests. And so in the staff report, we did identify some goals that we believe support the proposed change to the future land use map. And I won't read all of them, I'll just touch on them quickly. So the first one we identified is land use goal number 2, which talks about directing new growth and redevelopment to areas with existing infrastructure and nodes and corridors based on proximity to transit, shopping, services, and public amenities. Land use goal 4 is to continue to embrace the distinct character of Des Moines neighborhoods while allowing for new development, redevelopment. Talking about underneath that, just quickly, the mixture of land uses within neighborhoods and mixed use centers, diverse housing products, recreational opportunities. Land use goal 6 is recognize the value of Des Moines historic building stock and landscape and ensure the preservation for future residents. We feel that applies. We have a historic school that's been a part of this neighborhood for a long time, and this is a nice adaptive reuse of that to ensure that the building continues into the future. economic development goal 2. So the comprehensive plan has different chapters titled that relate to these goals. So this is the chapter discussing economic development, is recognize the value of Des Moines' historic building stock. You know what, I apologize. That is a repeat. But underneath it is to focus economic development efforts in neighborhood, community, and regional nodes and corridors served by transit. So this is what we were trying to pull forward. But the essence of that is this is a neighborhood node. There's transit on the street. So we felt that this is a spot economic development reinvestment should occur. So those are the other the criteria elsewhere in the comprehensive plan besides the future land use map that we reviewed this again. So that's why we are recommending that the future land use map be amended as written in the agenda and requested. The next part of my presentation is really thinking more specifics to what it is they're doing and probably what most are truly interested in. And I will go ahead and show just a little bit of the PUD conceptual plan, the drawings. I'm going to let them go into greater detail. This is their general layout for the site. So north being at this edge, school, parking, patio area along Franklin. Close up of those green space areas. Conceptual ideas of what those different areas may look like. Same with landscaping features on the site. Building elevations. Some renderings. Illustration of building materials. And then signage, including some signage on the chimney that's left, identifying 3 monument signs, identifying the development as a collective, and then a building mounted sign along the south facade. I think that probably is about as good as any. Leave it there. So I'm going to run through the staff recommended conditions. We are supportive of the request. We do think that there is a need for some parameters on how the project moves forward, how it's operated. And so we've offered up 15 different conditions. Some of these are fairly specific, some are broad. I'll go ahead and read through them and then try to discuss them as we go. So condition number 1 is that the PUD conceptual plan shall be updated to reflect the floor area and parking calculations for the proposed uses submitted by the applicant and included in section 2, subparagraph 2 of this report. As soon as I'm done reading these, I will go back to that and walk you through those, but I want to do all of these in order. The PUD conceptual plan shall be updated to reflect the additional project description information submitted by the applicant and included in section 1, subparagraph 1 of this report. The agenda heading was pretty lengthy, as the chair noted. There's a lot going on here. We have gathered more information as to how the intent of their proposal, put that in the report, and we can walk you through that here in a minute. 3 is the provision of easements for all existing utilities to the satisfaction of the city engineer, just a standard comment. There is a sewer line that runs through here that there needs to be an easement dedicated for. Number 4 is the provision of a note on the PUD conceptual plan that states all site lighting shall be directed downward and shielded from adjoining properties. Any pole-mounted lighting along private walkways shall not exceed 15 feet in height, and any pole-mounted lighting in parking areas shall not exceed 20 feet in height. This is standard language we use on site plans that you see. PUDs are special in the sense that you're creating your own standards, so we wanted to make sure that this was a note on there. Provision of a note in the conceptual plan that states direct light pass beyond the property line is prohibited. The maximum horizontal illumination, I'm not going to read all of this, but this is the lighting standards we use for when we evaluate site plans. Specifically, the commission sees this every time we see a convenience store comes before you. There's always a lighting plan, so we're expecting a lighting plan that would help us evaluate light trespass. 6, provision of a note on the PUD conceptual plan that states all utility and similar service lines to the building shall be located underground. This is service lines to the building, not in the right-of-way. This is not in downtown or on Ingersoll or any of our identified corridors. So this is just specific from the right-of-way to the building. Provision of a note in the PUD conceptual plan that states all rooftop mechanical equipment shall be screened with materials that are architecturally compatible with the building to the satisfaction of the city plan administrator. Standard language. 8 is standard language too. I won't read it, but it essentially is telling the applicant where meters and transformers and ground mounted equipment can be located, which is out of sight. We try to hide those to the extent possible. 9 is a note that states landscaping and buffering shall be provided in accordance with the city's landscaping standards for the C2 district or exceeded as illustrated on the conceptual plan or determined necessary by the city's plan administrator. And so the intent of this is we're just trying to set a relative base as a starting point. So we're using the calculations that would apply for buffering, landscaping, and C2. But because this is a unique project, and they're proposing some unique different landscaping features, we want to make sure that those go in. And then anything else as this comes forward with the site plan or PUD development plan that we think is necessary in addition to would be part of that. So that's the purpose of that language. The 10 is that a note be added that additional building mounted signage may be provided for individual tenants so long as the signage complies with the C1 district standards to the satisfaction of the planning administrator. Currently, their sign program is directed to market the site as a single group or a single body or a single site. The example they gave to me is that, like Hy-Vee, it has a bunch of activities underneath it, but it's marketed as Hy-Vee. Over time, we as staff could see a need to maybe, depending on what hotel chain they would have or something along those lines, there might be a need to have some sort of building mounted signage. The C1 district signage level is fairly minimal. The site's currently zoned C1. We feel that it's reasonable to have some sort of process in the PUD already identified to help guide us in making decisions on signage. So that's the intent of that condition. 11 is that the sidewalk connections to the adjoining park shall be provided to satisfaction of city staff. 12 and 13 and 14 are conditions that typically come out of our conditional use process that our zoning board of adjustment applies for uses that, for bar type uses that require a conditional use permit. PUDs are not subject to the zoning board of adjustment, but we felt that these standards of operation that we apply elsewhere in the city make sense to apply here. And so we've lumped them in. So 12 has to do with complying with the city's noise control ordinance. Outside speakers and amplified sound is prohibited except in use in compliance with a Type E sound permit. This is, like I said, this is language we use elsewhere. 13 is that litter and trash receptacles shall be located at convenient locations inside and outside the premise, and the operators of the business shall remove all trash and debris from the premise and adjoining public areas on a daily basis. Excuse me. And then 14 is that a note be added to the PUD that it's subject to legislative amendment to preclude the sale of liquor, wine, or beer if the zoning enforcement officer determines that the operation of the business becomes a nuisance or exhibits a pattern of violating the conditions of approval. And so that is just an avenue for us to bring this back and revisit that, much as would the zoning board of adjustment in review of a conditional use permit. The last is that the final development plan should be reviewed by the Planning and Zoning Commission and the City Council. This is a complex project. There's a lot going on. I mean, it's not just the agenda heading. It's exciting in the mix of uses, but we felt it'd be best to have the review of that in a public setting. And so that's why we are recommending that the final development plan, which is the site plan and the building elevations, come back through the P&Z City Council process. If that condition is not applied, then it would be an administrative review. I know from talking to the applicant that they are in agreement with the staff recommendation, except for they have a different angle on 15 that they'd like to propose to you, and it relates to the timing of their project and the two-step component. I'm not going to speak for them. I'll let them explain that to you, but wanted to point that out.
So are there any questions for Jason?
Yeah. I was just going to say, I'm going to let the applicant talk about the more details of the project.
Jason, just real quickly, in the agenda heading, it references 5 taverns. And if you could just touch quickly on what our understanding is, that based on the information the applicant provided, I believe the total square footage of a quote tavern use in the building is roughly equivalent to a single tavern anywhere else on a standalone site. They're basically proposing to have, my understanding is, different areas within the building where alcohol could be purchased. So it could be outside of a performance venue, or it could be outside of the restaurant, or it could be within the building. Those would all have to be nailed down more specifically on a final development plan, but they're all under one operation is my understanding. This is not 5 separate tavern owners within a building, and each one being several. So I believe the total square footage that's listed in the parking analysis lists the total square footage of quote tavern use that is actually proposed, and I think the applicant probably can provide more information.
Yeah, 6,548 square feet.
So similar to going to the Iowa Cubs and finding different locations to purchase beverages.
They're all under Iowa
under,
Cubs ownership, right?
Yep.
So
Yeah.
it's I would say, a very good example.
Okay,
So,
perfect.
I'll let them speak more to that, but I wanted to clarify, that is something we did receive a lot of comment
Yep, I
about.
saw that.
We saw that in the cards went by, so I wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
And I had a question about that too. So perhaps someone was going to have a wedding reception and they wanted to serve alcohol. That would be under the owner's license.
Yes, we would want, again, on the final development plan, to be very clear about where those, I guess if you'll call it distribution points, would be within the building. But that was part of the reason why we recommended the final development plan come back, because those are very specific details that a lot of times aren't thought about at the conceptual plan stage, but certainly we would expect the public and the commission and the council to want that very specific in a plan. So that was why we recommended what we did. Thank you.
Just a quick question then, is brewery, is that a place just where they brew beer, or is that also a place where beer can be sold?
I'll have to let them
speak
to that. Our understanding was it was brewing. They may sell their product at one of the distribution stations within the building.
Right.
But our understanding was intended to be a brewery itself.
Could we switch to the computer for the applicant? Thanks.
Hello, everyone. My name's Jeff Young, and my address is 3400 Lincoln Place Drive in Des Moines, Iowa. So I wanted to tell you that I'm a local guy. I grew up in Des Moines, was born in Des Moines, actually grew up at the trailer courts that aren't there anymore at 6701 Hickman. This is a plan that we've seen not just in the Northwest, but all over the country, and actually in our own backyard in Grinnell. So I've spent quite a bit of time with Angela Harrington that actually put together the Grinnell Hotel. If you've not seen that, it is hotel and it's restaurant bar. They've taken their gymnasium and made it into a ballroom, and they have an auditorium there also. So the idea here sounds sort of grandiose, but we've seen the McMenamin brothers in Oregon and Washington State do this now at 65 different properties since 1974. So I'm supposed to just say a few things because I could talk all night about it. So I'm gonna let Khalid talk next then, and Lindsay. So thank you very much.
Good evening, I'm Khalid Khan, 683 Polk Boulevard, representing Newman Munson Architects. Go ahead.
Lindley Kent, Newman Munson Architects at 418 6th Avenue, Des Moines.
So we wanted to give a little bit of background on the project and a little bit of what the vision for the building is to ease the comfort level. So a little bit of history. 1948 is when the original building was built, the school. There was an addition done roughly 10 years later, and then later in the 70s or early 80s, the church First Federated bought the building and then added a sanctuary for around 4,000 people. Moving forward, so you see the site plan of the building, the context. You can see the yellow, faint yellow line. That's the bike trail that's currently runs through the neighborhood. We're thinking about extending that a little bit towards our site as well to connect it. Again, we're looking at this. The project is essentially about revitalization and preservation of the neighborhood itself and then the buildings. And the school itself, we just don't build buildings like that anymore for various reasons. But the bones of the building are really strong, and then the idea of creating a sense of community we felt is really important for it. So our interest is to show you some of the precedents. So this plan is important. You can see a little bit more view. In terms of if you compare it to the McMenamin project that Jeff was mentioning, so what you saw the site plan there, and then you see in comparison the density of the neighborhood that you see in Portland, the scale of the building, so that the Kennedy School was a similar program. It was a school that was converted into an amenity space, if you would. You can see the vitality of the neighborhood over there in the context, the amount of parking it has. So we felt it really resonated well with what we're trying to do. It has very similar amenities that Jeff is envisioning for the project, so we wanted to show a little bit of that. It has a theater component to it. It has a pool aspect to it too that could be shared by the community. It has hotel, bars and restaurants. Basically, the gym space is used as a public event space as well. And the brewery, there is a brewery there as well. This is the Anderson School, again in Portland, or in Bethel, Washington. Similar program. One of the things that they've done here is actually built an additional outdoor pavilion, if you would, which is, again, connects people to the outdoors, brings the community together. And it creates this really vibrant sense of community that's, to us, is unique to Des Moines, but it's not unique nationwide. Moving a little bit closer, as Jeff mentioned, the Hotel Grinnell is something we can all go and experience in terms of the program aspect of it. It's a little bit smaller in scale, but in terms of amenity spaces, they're providing similar outdoor spaces, restaurants, bars, environments, a boutique hotel. They use their old gym as a ballroom space as well. So we just felt like we wanted to feel people comfortable with this idea that this is not something unique that we're bringing. It has precedents that have been very successful, and as just mentioned, in the West Coast specifically, I mean, the McMenamins have really done a lot of facilities very similar.
So So moving back to our site here, this is the existing site. You'll see that, as Kyle had mentioned, the building's in fantastic condition. Existing parking is on the north side of the building there. And where we're oriented right now in this image is how we'll be looking at the site plan. So north is to the right of the screen there on that parking side. As we go to the PUD plan, you'll see that it's fairly similar to what we were looking at, which is there currently. So we're leaving a lot of the building, well, really leaving the building as it is. We're leaving parking more or less as it is, actually adding some planting, that sort of thing. And then really the major kind of changes are out on the exterior. So we have the east garden and the south patio, which I'll kind of zoom into here. So the east garden was on along 48th Street there. So this is closer to the residential neighborhoods in the area. We are planning an intensive garden in this area. So you'll see some examples of some plantings there, variety of textures, colors, heights, that sort of thing. And then the pathways, these are not meant to be sidewalks. These are crunchy landscape areas using pavers, stepping stones, things of that nature. And the idea is that we have these wandering paths, and this is really a community garden. Anybody can come in. We've built in nodes to sit and take a rest. This is meant to be a kind of quiet area as far as the garden goes. Moving to the south side of the building along Franklin Avenue, which this is an area that is more of a social gathering area. So this is where we're planning that outdoor additional building. This is the one addition to the existing building. A small space, you see some example images there. We're envisioning that being some sort of a wooden type structure. But that would essentially function as an extension of the restaurant space that I'll talk about a little bit later within the building there. And then outside of that, you have seating area, spaces to grab a bite to eat, that sort of thing. And then we have a play area, which of course is for children, but we're actually envisioning it being used by adults as well. So some good examples there from around the country and actually up in Canada as well. But something planned there that this really creates a real family atmosphere on that south patio. So coming back to the overall site, you'll see that when now that we've talked about the kind of things that we're changing on the exterior, we're putting the one thing that maybe could generate a little bit of noise along Franklin Avenue away from the residential area. We're putting that quiet garden along 48th. That's a great view for the neighbors as well as the people inside the building there. You'll see a couple spots on the lower side there that show some of our new monument signs. Those are oriented so that they're shown down the street, but that also then means that the light isn't shining across to the neighbors, making sure we're taking that into consideration. We're only adding those 3 signs currently, and actually one of them is an existing sign. We're just kind of moving it a little bit. And as was mentioned, right now we don't have current plans for additional major building signage, just minimal directional signage, but we'd follow that provision for anything in the future. So looking into the building, actually, I'm going to back up just a little bit. Forgot a few things. So the parking, we're leaving that much as it is. We're not anticipating the parking lot being full unless really that large auditorium is having an event. And in that case, we're planning on having parking staff there to direct traffic, make sure safety's top priority, make sure people aren't parking where they're not supposed to be, that sort of thing. As well as, so the movie screen that is planned for the west side of that parking lot there, that would use a Bluetooth technology, so there wouldn't be loudspeakers or something like that creating a lot of noise pollution for the neighborhood. So now talking about the interior of the building. The building is in fantastic condition. These are just a few of the spaces and kind of things in the building that show some of the character that we're working with. The main plan is to not dramatically change the building. We want to work with what's currently there. So rolling into some of the program that's planned for the space. A lot of the spaces that were what they were before, like gymnasiums, will stay gymnasiums. Be able to be used by by the community, rented for events, maybe like a wedding reception, as you mentioned. Auditoriums will stay auditoriums. The cafeteria and the kitchen will become a restaurant, much like it was used previously. The locker rooms are potentially going to become, the hotel lobby and another restaurant area. Nursery area will continue to be the Montessori school that's currently there. Classrooms will be used for office space, hotel rooms, event rental space, retail and mercantile space. The shops classrooms is where we're currently planning for that potential microbrewery, which would make beverages on site and then potentially sell that on site as well. The second floor science lab is the only dedicated bar currently planned for the building, and I'll kind of talk a little bit more about that in just a second. But and then the band and choir rooms are planned to be small performance venues. The courtyards would be where the soaking pool, a secure school play area, Zen garden, and a social gathering space would happen. And then I'd mentioned that new exterior building is really the one new piece we're adding, is that kind of extension of that cafeteria restaurant. There'll be some spaces that we need to make rooms for additional restrooms, elevator, that sort of thing. But as far as the alcohol sales go, we talked a little bit about that earlier. So we have the one dedicated bar, which is a science lab. There is, oops, that upper left is a picture of that science lab. It's just a classroom size, right? But it was a lab. So the plan is to make that a bar that's themed around science, right? But beyond that, really the other locations we're talking about having alcohol would be in association with the restaurants that are in the space. So, I mean, that's not different than really any restaurant that you'd go to around here. And then again, those concession areas. So when there is an event, making sure we're able to accommodate that in the various locations within the building. So moving in just a little bit to how maybe these spaces would transform. So some of the things that we really want to make sure we're doing is respecting the time period of the building. We don't want to make major changes, but bringing it back to that kind of retro atomic era, somewhere between mid-50s to mid-60s time period. And really working with what we have. So we don't want to blow out all these spaces and make them a blank canvas. We want to work with that. So you'll see some images that are obviously older and then some new, and we're hopefully gonna land somewhere in that realm. And then the hotel rooms, much like the McMenamins examples, if it's a classroom and it has a chalkboard, it's staying, right? And so we just furnish it to be a hotel room from there. And at this point, I'll invite Tiva to talk through the community support and impact.
Yeah. One thing I did want to mention is Move Des Moines does qualify at 48th and Franklin as a node point for future urban revitalization and development. So we feel like, again, very strongly that this project meets that criteria.
Tiva Dawson, 1424 48th Street. I am a neighbor and I'm also serving as part of Group Creatives, a project lead on this. I am a neighbor. I live 4 blocks away, and I'm a parent who sends her daughter to Birchwood Montessori at Franklin Junior High every single day. We love to be able to walk there. I'm really excited about this project. For 70 years, this large piece of land has not been on the tax roll, and with this project moving forward, we'd be able to expect, with a $10 million evaluation, we'd get about $400,000 in taxes every year from this. Precedent, when we did research out in the Northwest, projects had a much higher valuation, so we expect that number will actually increase. I'm also really excited to be able to tell you, and I think that the neighborhood leaders are here as well to convey their enthusiasm, but this is at the corner of 3 different neighborhood associations, and all 3 of them have voted in favor of the project. I did want to speak to the condition 15 that Jason had talked about. That one, which was requiring that we come back to you as well as City Council on the site plan. We recognize an interest in having kind of more public process around the site design and are happy to come back here. A lot of that site design is also about getting those gardens planted. So we're requesting in order to kind of try to condense the timeline of not going back to council. It would give us a little bit shorter timeline in order to start moving on those gardens this spring. So we're looking for kind of an amendment of that staff recommendation. And I think think that's it for the presentation. Thank you for hearing about this. It's an exciting project. It's a major redevelopment in this area. I also sit on the Neighborhood Revitalization Committee. If you remember, there's 4 different neighborhoods that are picked. Our neighborhood's considered one that's kind of teetering in that middle area, and we think these sort of projects are major investments to kind of help propel my neighborhood towards the positive. Thank you.
All right, so before you guys go, any questions for the team? Must have explained it all. Thank you. So at this time, I'm going to ask if there's anybody in the audience who wishes to speak in favor of the project. And again, as Jason said, if you haven't signed the, is it over here on this side, Jason? The sheet that, yeah, please sign in, but then otherwise line up here. Or you can do it after you speak too. So you're first.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and good evening. I'm Cece Ibsen, 4310 Ovid Avenue in Beaverdale. I also have Ibsen Law Firm at 2629 Beaver Avenue, Suite 3, right in beautiful downtown Beaverdale. I'm here tonight on behalf of the Beaverdale Neighborhood Association, comprised, I'm told, of some 5,000 households and businesses. I serve as president of the board of directors. In March of this year, our board unanimously approved the following resolution. Whereas the Beaverdale Neighborhood Association believes that Franklin Junior High is of significant historical importance to the neighborhood and the surrounding area, and whereas the Beaverdale Neighborhood Association believes that with the City of Des Moines' support, this unique asset will become a regional draw that will further the economic vitality of the area, and whereas the Beaverdale Neighborhood Association believes that the preservation and adaptive reuse of Franklin Junior High can be achieved through the rezoning of the property to a mixed-use development classification that allows for a diverse range of commercial uses, including restaurants, hotels, and entertainment venues. And whereas the Beaverdale Neighborhood Association believes a mixed-use zoning classification is generally appropriate for the site given adjacent development and road network, it is hereby resolved that the Beaverdale Neighborhood Association supports We Can Build It LC's application for rezoning of Franklin Junior High. A friend of mine who is a pastor at a small town here in Iowa is currently traveling in the Pacific Northwest and stayed in Portland at the property that was featured in some of the materials you saw earlier. He's been posting on Facebook about his travels and his experiences there, and loved that there was a boutique hotel along with a fine dining restaurant and a craft brew pub all in one area. There are some in the neighborhood who have questioned the economics of a boutique hotel in Beaverdale. That was something that was discussed early on as Jeff Young presented this project to us many months ago. I will tell you we are a neighborhood of smaller homes, many without overnight guest space. When friends and family come to visit, the closest hotels are in the Drake area or up on Merle Hay Road. So for my part, I think a boutique hotel would do very, very well in this space. The restaurants and bars in our neighborhood are thriving to the point where additional options would benefit all of us. We don't want to turn anyone away. One person, I think, has expressed a concern about parking and traffic. Apparently, there were issues with overflow cars parked on the streets during times when First Federated had services in the space. Also, traffic leaving, of course, of services let out. Parking in Beaverdale is always going to be an issue. We are an urban neighborhood in an increasingly urban city. But 48th Street is far wider than, say, for example, Beaver Avenue, right by where my office is located, where we have cars parked along both sides of the street, day and night. But I will tell you, these cars belong to people who come to my neighborhood to do business and have a good time, and I think that's a good thing. For my part, I cannot wait for this project to be completed, for my neighborhood to have entertainment, concert, and show space like Hoyt Sherman. Since purchasing the property, Jeff Young has integrated himself into our neighborhood full bore. He's opened the parking lot for the Beaverdale Bluegrass Festival and Fall Festival. He was even out there baking and handing out cookies for all of us who were down there bright and early on the morning of Fall Festival, lining up parade entries. I welcome him as a neighbor, and I encourage the board in the strongest possible terms to approve this request. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. Ethan Standard, 1307 48th Street. I feel like I drew the short straw following Cece. My remarks are much more brief. but just so you know, I'm the president of the Waveland Park Neighborhood Association. I am here both as a neighbor and representing the neighborhood association this evening. Over the past year, the development team that's been put together for Franklin Junior High has made a concerted effort to engage neighborhood residents and our association's respective Beaverdale's, our own, and Merle Hay, to gather input on the proposed redevelopment of this property. They've also worked extensively with nearby neighborhood associations to ensure that this does not detract from the character of our neighborhoods, but only adds to it and adds vibrancy. And I'm going to kind of go off script here because I don't like prepared remarks. As I'm sitting here thinking about what kind of neighborhood I want to see Waveland Park and this part of Des Moines become, I can't help but think if this doesn't happen, it's not going to become what I hope it will be. I'm missing right now bedtime with my 6-month-old. And as I think about living in the neighborhood for the next 20 years and what it looks like, I can't imagine this being a gaping hole in our neighborhood if this does not go forward. So on behalf of the association and myself and my family, I urge you to approve the rezoning and the PUD as presented. Thank you.
Maybe your 6-month-old watched you on television.
Hi, I'm very excited to be here. My name is Betsy Parker. I'm at 2101 48th Street. My husband, Joe, will introduce himself and speak for himself. Can I move this?
Sure.
Okay. I made a shirt for all of you. No more empty buildings. I don't have a map to show you, but our home is directly across the street from the parking lot of this building. I'm sorry, this is very emotional for me. So when we moved in, the church owned the building, and we were thrilled about that because we thought, what better neighbor is a church? And then the church left, and what happened in that time, well, what happened while the church was still there was that we had people coming in and using the parking lot to drag race and people doing donuts. And then one night at about 6 p.m., I walked outside and there were two pickup trucks, and there were individuals coming out of each truck, and they were fighting and they were screaming. And I ran across the street to take a picture because that's what the police had told me to do. They said, you need to get video. We need to know who these people are that are using this space in this way. So I ran across the street to try and take a video, and at that time, guns were pulled from both vehicles. And I'm terrified of this building being empty. I'm terrified of another building being empty on our street. We already have the Mercy building at Franklin and 48th that's empty. I can't even imagine what will happen. I was so excited to hear about the possibility of this project and to meet Jeff. Within 3 days of me getting his phone number and calling him and telling him all this stuff was happening, he had blockades up and that parking lot was shut off, and that was it. There was nobody showing up there with guns. There was nobody showing up there to loiter. He was my favorite neighbor the second he came into this neighborhood. And I appreciate him so, so much. And I'm so excited for the possibility of bringing vibrancy into this neighborhood that I love so much. I grew up in this area. This is the only place I've ever wanted to be. And I love it so much. And I just want to see it really explode into something amazing. And I truly believe that this project could do that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Joe Parker, her quieter half. So I grew up, I'll try to keep this fairly short, but I grew up with a grandmother who drove me out to Portland, Oregon every summer. We had aunts and uncles that lived out there, so we traveled to Portland every year, and I did that, through grade school and up into high school. Of course, I had cousins graduating, so I kept going back. When my cousin and I, Joel, we got in a lot of trouble when we were younger, so we'd go out once we both had licenses and those kinds of things and tool around Portland, which was amazing for a kid from Southwest Iowa. And there were parts of Portland that were off limits for us, and we knew that there are certain bridges, if you want to go downtown, you don't go through those neighborhoods. And my wife and I decided to go visit Portland because I was so excited about that city. I love it and wanted to introduce her to it and show it to her. So we went out there, and we stayed in a neighborhood that when I was a kid we could not stay in, and the reason a large part of the reason we were able to stay in that type of a neighborhood is because these types of renovations were happening. So we stayed near a McMenamin project. We actually went to I'm going to probably butcher the name, but it was a venerable project. It's Washington High School. They've got Revolution Hall in there. We went and watched a show. It was amazing. We loved it. It was fantastic. And we moved to Des Moines on January 20th of 2017. Is that right? Yeah. And when we moved into town, we wanted to live in Beaverdale. We found a house in Beaverdale. And the reason I moved to Beaverdale is because I'd never met anybody who lived in Beaverdale and said they wish they would have left sooner. Nobody ever said that. And most people said, I really miss my house in Beaverdale. I wish I still lived in Beaverdale. Within the last year, I met one person who was happy they moved out of Beaverdale. Maybe not happy, they loved the house, but there was some crime happening in the neighborhood that they lived in that part of Beaverdale. And so that's the first person I've met, and I feel like we're at a turning point. There's been some crime in the neighborhood, more than I expected when I moved down here from Ames. Not that Ames is crime-free, but I just feel like pretty strongly in the way that my wife does that I think this helps the neighborhood in a positive, and I know absolutely Jeff has been a positive influence on that building and that space by doing what Betsy talked about. So full support, really excited about it. I think we need it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hello, good evening. My name is Megan Christofferson. My address is 6285 Sudbury Court in Johnston. I am one of the founders of Birchwood Montessori, which is the school that's currently located kind of right in the middle of this ginormous building. And I met Jeff probably about 10 years ago, maybe a little bit longer, on another project to bring Gigi's Playhouse, the Down Syndrome Awareness Center, move it to one of the properties that he owned in Windsor Heights. So when I was going to start this new school, I called Jeff, and by luck, he says, I think I've got this idea, meet me at this address. So I drive to the building, walk in, and it's like nostalgic and all those things you love. Then he starts telling me about the plans of building a community within a building, and part of Montessori philosophy is really to be integrated into your community, be hands-on. And I was just like, what dumb luck do I have to make the right phone call at the right time? We couldn't be more excited to be the first people in this building and a part of the project. We can't wait to start exposing our students and our children to these brilliant local business owners who are bringing life into our local communities. So from our standpoint, we are fully on board and can't wait to start teaching all of our students more things about how community works and how business goes. And I guess I'll just end by saying that thank you for listening and considering all of this. And in my experience with Jeff, he's such a man of his word, and if he's never done anything to make me question his integrity in the least. So we're fully on board with all of the wonderful ideas to integrate community in under this building. So thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Bill Nellens. I have a studio at 413 Southwest 8th Street, and I now live in Windsor Heights at 7108 Jefferson. I've been an advertising commercial photographer here in Des Moines since 1980. I've had several studios in different areas of the town. And when I first found out about this project, I have friends that went here. I used to go over and pick them up when I was 16 years old, It has memories for me. And when I went over here and I met Jeff and the areas, the community people that are already involved with it and the attitude that is there, I'm going to cut it short. I wrote 2.5 pages and timed it out to 4.5 minutes so that I could be sure and get it in, because I wanted to answer the way it was in the agenda and explain more about the personality, but they've done it already. Everything about it. I'm just here because of the enthusiasm. I have friends in Portland and in Bothell, Washington, and I've been in communication with them, and they love it. My wife has been to the one in Portland. Everything about it is so good. It's got a vibe that I'm planning on moving my studio there. I'll go down there on a Saturday and walk through and see kids work in the gym, like local sports groups, practicing soccer in the wintertime or whatever, and musical groups, Girls Rocks, the Harmony Choir. It's a wonderful project, and I'm just going to bow out, sharing my enthusiasm. I'm really for it.
Too bad we couldn't tell.
My name is Mark Johnson, 1089 44th Street, Waveland Park, board member. Like Franklin Avenue, I think they said it came on in 1948. I came into Des Moines April 4th, 1948. Been here ever since. I love this neighborhood, and I'm so enthused about what's going on. That little quadrant right there, Franklin Avenue, for 30 years. I mean, the church is okay on Sunday, it was nice, but for 30 years, all the way down to Merle Hay Road, it needs, and this is just what we need, is the enthusiasm, and that's all I wanted to say. The enthusiasm is so good.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jeff Wood. I own a business called Gravitate Co-working at 317 6th Avenue downtown. I also own a location in Valley Junction. I've worked with Jeff for 5 years as a business partner and property owner, and I'm here to support the project. You know, a year ago or so when Jeff started talking about this, he has lots of big ideas, and he kind of said, I'm going to buy this school and we're going to do all these things, and I didn't quite get it. Then he brought me into the school and I walked around and I said, okay, I think I can see it. And then 2 weeks ago I actually went out to Portland and I visited the Kennedy School, I visited the Washington High School, which was mentioned, and now I really see his vision, and I think it's something that can really add to Des Moines. We've been working with Jeff, we continue to work with Jeff on our downtown properties, and now we're in talks to professionally manage the office space, which we do for entrepreneurs, freelancers, and small business in Des Moines, to do that as a component of what's going to go into the school. So I'm just here to support the project, and I appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Joe Barron. I live at 1503 48th Street. My wife Roberta and I have lived there for 23 years. We're very excited about this project. We've toured the building. It's amazing. In fact, when we heard about it, we happened to have a family trip planned to Portland, Oregon. So we went to the Kennedy School. We stayed overnight at the Kennedy School. We were blown away by it. I don't think we could have even appreciated what the idea was until we had seen and walked around a project like that. We liked that so much that we sought out. We went to another McMiniman property outside of Portland. It was a county home that had been done up according to the same theory, and equally impressed. And we just think this will be a great addition to the neighborhood. It's just what we need. We've talked to other neighbors who are excited about it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Chris Jansen, I'm here on behalf of the Merle Hay Neighborhood Association Board of Directors. I also live at 2206 52nd Street. To start off, I would say that Jeff has been very engaging throughout the process. We started off with some committee meetings, just in general, between the three neighborhoods about this node, this corridor and that intersection. And we had a committee meeting where we met with Jeff and talked about this. And then he came to a board of directors meetings. And then he came to one of our quarterly neighborhood meetings. Then he came to another neighborhood board meeting. And in the meantime, he's been giving tours to anybody who will want to go to the building and see it, which has been fantastic. So extremely engaging, which is always good to hear from that perspective. The other thing I would say is he has been consistent throughout in his passion and vision for this property, which we also appreciate, consistency and passion for something, because that usually translates to a good revitalization effort. And I would say he's been a good listener. Every time that somebody has brought up a concern, he has listened. He has stayed true to his passion and vision, because listening doesn't always mean you necessarily agree, but he has listened with enthusiasm and done what he can to make sure that he at least heard the concerns and did what he could to address them. Moving on to that, the concerns that we heard as the neighborhood, potential traffic impacts, which there was a traffic study and it addressed a lot of those concerns, so we haven't heard that one since that traffic study came out. The number of locations within the building where alcohol would be served. And I understood the concept, having, again, I'll just cliche, I have also been to the Kennedy School and Edgefield. So when Jeff was like, oh, I want to do this, I was like, oh, I loved that trip. That was fantastic. And everybody who's gone to Portland since, I've said, you got to go here. This is a fun spot. It's a good time. But I understood what he was going for, so it was like but I'm glad that it's been clarified, and I think that has been clarified in the staff report. And so in general, we're okay with that, but we've definitely heard concerns about that from the neighborhood. So maybe That's obviously, there are people that are just going to be against that type of establishment in general, and then there's others that may just have a misconception, whatever it is. It's out there, and it's a concern that we have to note as part of our process. Signage, again, for individual businesses, we didn't have any problems with the signage that was proposed, but the potential of individual businesses having signage could be end up being a little cluttersome. Concerns about the market for hotel rooms. Again, it's maybe, you know, a market is not necessarily something we deal with as a board, nor do we know the market for hotel rooms, but it's one of those things like, wow, is that really going to work here? But I would also reiterate Cece's comments about when my in-laws come from Atlanta, they have to stay downtown. You know, that's where we put them, and it would be nice to have them a little closer for the most part. And then the other thing was there was some issues with code violations at. Oh, guess
that is because none of us have been to Portland.
Oh. There were some issues with code violations at some other properties owned by the applicant that we want to make sure that we're on top of those here. And again, there's a city process for that, but we want to make sure that that those are addressed if that arises in the future. Now flip to the other side, the excitement that we heard, which was, I think, overwhelmingly more than the concerns, at least in my perception and many of the board members. Reuse of the historic building would be number one. We didn't want to see it torn down. We can't even imagine the density that you'd have to build in residential property to try and offset the cost of tearing that down and then selling it back. It would be, if you looked at it that way from a simple pro forma standpoint, it would be more dense than the apartments that are to the west right now in order to make that cash flow. So I know we were also excited about the fact that the developer isn't, or the applicant isn't asking for anything other than the right to try this, the right, a rezoning to say, hey, I want to give this concept a shot. The planned site improvements, I think, are fantastic, and the board was definitely on board with those. The potential of the proposed reuse of the building to have a positive impact on that corridor was also something we've talked about. As somebody mentioned earlier, the Mercy Behavioral Sciences, that's been empty for a while, and there are some plans for that, but they also have not recently, we saw some developments for that, we've seen some others. We haven't heard anything lately, but it's not nice to have it vacant. And the other part of Mercy, my understanding is they're moving up onto Hickman soon, so that entire swath will be vacant. Stodgills, if any of you are familiar with that area, there used to be it was a TV retailer, so in general, that market went away, but it is now it's a UCS, it's a clinic, and for the most part, my understanding is they serve recovering addicts for the most part, and so we have a lot of traffic there that it's a use, and it's in the neighborhood, and I don't know of any issues that we've had with it, but again, it's a reuse of the property that is different than what it was years ago, and definitely not retail focused or neighborhood focused. Franklin Plaza in general has had some vacancy issues that we'd like to see this project help. And then finally, the Franklin Court Apartments. It's a good apartment complex. I would guess that some of the people that live there would be happy to have some employment right next door to them with some of these options that are going into here and some of the businesses. So we talk a lot about, I would guess that that's one of the more affordable apartment complexes in the city, and to have some job opportunities right next to them would be fantastic. Overall, the board voted and passed the following motion. The Merle Hay Neighborhood Association Board of Directors supports the rezoning request for Franklin Junior High with staff's recommendations. The vote was completed today. It was not unanimous, but it was 5 yes, 1 no, 1 abstain. And that's all I have. So we support it, and we hope that you guys go forward with it as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
How you doing? I'm Sam Summers. I live at 640 56th Street. I own Woolies in East Village, and then I book concerts around Des Moines and the Midwest. I own and produce Hinterland Music Festival, and then I do Nightfall on the River, and soon to do Waterworks Park stuff. So I just wanted to come and say that I support this project. I think it provides us with the unique venue setting here that we don't already have in Des Moines, and that being a 600 cap seated theater. Woolies being about 650 standing. There are shows that don't hit the market because they need to be in a seated setting, whether that be a comedy show, podcast live taping, a magic show, or just a singer-songwriter or a concert that wants to be seated. So If you look at a venue in Iowa City, there's a venue called the Englert, which is 700 capacity. They keep super busy. It's something we don't have here. So I'm right now I'm waiting to kind of hear this decision so I know if I can continue booking stuff at this space. I have a lot of holds out for this fall, and I want to really utilize this space. That's all I've got.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jaren Hart, and I'm the executive director of the Des Moines Music Coalition. My personal address is 718 18th Street. I just wanted to say, our organization, the mission is to support and cultivate Iowa's music economy with a vision of establishing Des Moines as, a recognized music city. And a project like this would, of course, help to accomplish that for the reasons that Sam just spoke about, and just having a really exciting mixed-use development that would, of course, create jobs, serve as a regeneration tool, increase economic output. It would be a tourism driver. It enhances social inclusion and supports a thriving, night economy. And, we've had some very preliminary conversations about, potentially using the space to provide affordable rehearsal spaces for artists. And, regardless of whether, we do that or not, this space is incredible, and it's such a, it would be such an important piece for Des Moines. So I just wanted to speak in support.
Thank you very much.
Good evening. I'm Dory Jansma. My address is 1900 High Street, Unit 119, Des Moines, Iowa. I am the president of the board of Girls Rock Des Moines. Jeff Young has been a supporter of us for more than 5 years, and I remember to the day the moment he called me when he was considering buying this property. I was actually at the World Food Festival volunteering on the Sunday morning, and Jeff called me and said, "Hey, does Girls Rock have a place to be able to work on their music and such?" And I just laughed. I'm like, "No, we're a poor nonprofit." And since that time, he's gone and purchased it, and he's helped develop it, and it is now our home. And it has been an amazing change to our organization because we do have a home. We get to have workshops. We have overnight songwriting get-togethers. It's just been an amazing change to our organization. And the thing is, this project has not only come with a great business mind, but it comes from a heart and from passion, and the amount of diversity he's adding and what it's going to add to this neighborhood is amazing. The thing is, coming from our nonprofit, if this doesn't get passed, then there's not going to be revenue to keep this alive, and then we go homeless as an organization. So I'm pleading from the bottom of my heart, from a nonprofit, to please let us keep our home. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Rachel Gulick, 2310 Stanton Avenue. I was born and raised in Des Moines, grew up on 63rd and Franklin, attended Roosevelt, Drake, and I didn't get very far to the south side, I guess. But I am the chair of the Girls Rock Tech Studio Committee. We are currently in the process of building the first ever education-based, run by women, built by women, recording studio in the Midwest, second in the nation. And Jeff has so graciously offered Franklin Junior High as our home, as Dory mentioned. We are doing something unique and creating a space for kids ages 10 to 16 to go and learn the skills to record their own voices, to implement their own creativity, self-empowerment, and that's something that will be the catalyst for positive change in our community. It will bring neighborhoods together, as we've seen here tonight. But I'm in support of it, not just because of Jeff's generosity, but because, you know, growing up in this neighborhood, I was talking with my dad today, who still lives at 63rd in Franklin, and we were kind of joking, like, you know, the best thing to happen to our neighborhood recently was the renovation of the library and the expansion of the public gardens, and, you know, there's a little development happening over by Hillis right now. But so to that extent, I can understand the community's concern pertaining to, you know, this big project, because it does seem and appear massive. But I think that Jeff has done the due diligence to ensure that the community has had a voice in this process, and that to that extent as well, you know, I tend to think that revitalization can sometimes be a double-edged sword, you know, when I think about property values and how that would affect a community. This space now becoming a taxable space is exciting, I think. And Jeff is not the individual that's going to be able to remedy Des Moines', you know, varying property tax issue, if we could call it that. But I think that it's a step in a positive direction that I support as a community member and small business owner and vested individual. And so let's do it.
Well, I just have, may I ask one question? I'm just dying to know. You said that your organization is the second in the nation.
Yes, ma'am.
Does that mean Portland is the first?
No,
Oh, okay.
in fact, so we modeled Girls Rock Tech, our studio, off of the Women's Audio Mission based out of San Francisco, California. And ours will be, that's professional focused for, you know, women. And they do have a youth outreach program. However, ours is like the first actually that's education based, I'm going to say in the nation, to be founded purely for that purpose. And as the chair of that committee, you know, some of the goals that I have is to do, for example, a citywide school mixtape, you know, getting every public school involved to do a collaborative piece, like an album, and working with folks in the community to accomplish that as we speak. So we are hoping to be recording this summer for the first time while we have camp, our two-week summer camp at Franklin. As Dory mentioned, presently we keep our equipment there. We have workshops there. And so it's really given us a home to be able to provide these services, because when you have that variable of no space to meet, or you have to rent it or find it, it becomes taxing as a small nonprofit organization when you're just, you know, grassroots and doing it DIY.
Well, good luck to your organization.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm sorry, I was so excited to speak to you all that I forgot that my neighbor who wasn't able to come had written this letter in support, and I wanted to
put in the record. Yeah, you
yes,
can pass it
absolutely.
around.
And this is one of the neighbors again that's across the street from the parking lot as well.
Great, thank you. Anyone else wish to speak in favor?
Yo, what's up? Ian Miller, 1422 8th Street, Des Moines. I did grow up in Beaverdale. This is the first time I've been excited to return since that time. Not that Beaverdale's not great, but 20 years was enough in that neighborhood for me. This is very exciting. I'm an experiential artist that has been folded into this project. And one thing that I wanted to make a point of is that, in a sense, Jeff is a unicorn of sorts. I'm a creative, and in the type of work that I do, it is hard to find the projects that allow for my type of creativity to flourish in this community. I'm one of many creative individuals on the team, Tiva and Matt, who folded me in, Trish Myers, and several others, in the project are very creatively driven, and this provides an outlet as well as an experiential place for the community. So let's do it.
Thank you. And did you sign in, sir?
Ian.
You did? Did you? I just wondered if you had signed in. Is there, last call, anyone else in favor of the project? All right, so then at this time, is there anyone who would like to express concerns? Please step forward, name and address.
Yes, my name is Melvin Free. I live at 1916 47th, which means, of course, that this project, which everybody seems to be enthused of, is within about 300 feet of my house. That is very concerning to me. I think the county's adjuster will have to be concerned too, because he's going to have to adjust the property values of everybody on 48th and 47th Street. Everybody seems to gloss over traffic. Well, we got traffic. It's going to be terrible. Noise. We've got a street where there's many small children, and it's going to be busier than ever. I strongly urge you folks to deny the planning zoning, the zoning change.
All right, thank you for coming.
I'm Barbara Free. Yeah, all what he said.
May we have your address, please? For the
1916 47th Street.
Thank you.
I grew up in Beaverdale. I graduated from this very junior high many years ago. We have, according to what the plan is, 5 bars within 300 feet of our home. And I can't believe that we could be out in our backyard and have anything but a lot of noise and a lot of lights going on in our quiet little neighborhood. We have children in our neighborhood. It's kind of turning over. I raised my kids there, my grandkids have come there, and we have new people moving into our street who have young children. And we don't need the noise and the activity that is facilitated by 5 bars within 300 feet of our home. My husband covered the idea that it's going to decrease the value of our home. We'd have to decide whether we're going to move right away or stick it out and lose money. The lighting and the noise that comes from that area, it's less than a block away, and we can hear it at night, and we know whenever there's festivities going on. There are a lot of good things that happen in that building, and I can approve of all of them except this whole idea of the night bars and the outside activities. As far as the parking, to the north, when you get up to Hickman, there's the big water tower, and there's a big park, and there's a marvelous place in the summertime for concerts and that kind of thing at that park, which is just adjacent to this building. So I ask you to take into consideration the people who live so close and who will be have to modify their activities because of the things that are going on up there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Terry Pond, 1921 48th Street. I also live across the street. I too want to give great respect for all you people who have come in tonight, because that's what this is about, and I appreciate all the things you've said. I think there are great things happening in that building, but I too have great concern about my child personally and the children in the neighborhood and the children in the venue. I think that we're looking at a property that is going to it's doing very well without alcohol in its current moment now. It is not having anything outside. There's not noise. There's not a bar. There's not a restaurant. They're doing exceptional things with people who are getting things into a community, bringing things in. I really do worry about the amount of traffic coming down my street. I have a small child. I have a dog. My dog has already been hit on that street. We've had multiple accidents at the corner of 48th and Franklin where cars smash into each other because there are stop signs there and they don't see the stop sign. The cars parking on that street cause even more disruption to seeing that stop sign. We have all sorts of things that are going on in that venue. So I really think that we can do without the alcohol. In addition, I am an educator. I work in West Des Moines Valley High School. I have a hard time, and I don't know, man, I'm not an expert by all means. I don't know that I'm even speaking in the correct context here. However, I have looked into whether or not alcohol can be in the premise with a school venue, and whether the Montessori could be taking place when there's alcohol in this venue. And when I spoke to Jeff about it at the meeting, he told me that was okay, but when I looked into it further with people in the city, they told me it absolutely is not. So if it comes down to alcohol or serving our children, I'm gonna bet that they're gonna go with alcohol. And I don't wanna see that. I also don't want to think that we're gonna have children in that venue walking outside, watching people drink and smoke and swear and have all sorts of things going on that maybe we don't want our children exposed to. I personally like to live in my home with my windows open. I like to have the night air coming in all night long. I certainly don't want to have to listen to people swearing and yelling, and I understand that it's not going to be, Jeff was very clear about it not being a bar like Miss Kitty's. It's just going to be a venue, but alcohol brings noise, and there's just no way around that. I would really encourage you to think about if this was your home and your family or your grandchildren or your young little ones having to experience that night after night after night. It's taken away from my family. And I didn't move this property to be across from a commercial venue. I moved this property to live in Beavertail because it has a small town feel, because I can stand at the corner and talk to my neighbors and enjoy my little peaceful town. And it's going to be taken away from me. In addition, there's the Tower Park that's right next door that is going to put in a brand new water facility this summer. They're putting in a water sprayer park, so now we're going to pull more kids into that neighborhood to come and play who are going to be walking past a venue where we're serving alcohol and drinking beer and swearing and yelling and all sorts of things. I think that's a bad impact on our city. The building, I think, can function at extreme positive things in our community without having to serve alcohol, without having to be a brewery. And I don't know if we have the capability of a committee to say we pass all these things without this. Again, I'm out of my world here. I teach high school science. I don't know what you all do, and I appreciate what you do, but I would love to see it be shut down in the alcohol venue. In addition, I would just speak to just the idea of the patios. Beaverdale, like many areas of our city, has a very antiquated water drainage system. As you know, the city has passed some provisions to try to improve that problem. We already have a ridiculous amount of water on our streets. The water floods into my basement. The water floods onto 48th Street. Sometimes when it's raining, it is literally a river in my front yard. And there's just not enough drainage. The more cement, the more patio, the more area that we put down in that cement means more water to our streets. And I think that will fall into our streets and into our sewer systems that is not prepared to handle that, into our homes that are not prepared to that. I'm also speaking a little bit about the building that they spoke of earlier. Mercy Hospital supposedly has been purchased by what I understand is Hubble's now property. In the future, what I understand them to do is build a senior residence there. I cannot imagine any senior wanting to live across the street from a patio in a bar. I just do not see anyone wanting to do that. So then where does that bring value to my community? So again, I would just urge to look at that and think about those things as we think about it. I'm not against progress. I certainly do not want that building to be shut down. I don't think there's any intentions of people thinking it's going to sit empty. No one wants to see Jeff go. I don't think my community, the people who are voting against it, are at all against any of the things that are happening. They just think that this vision can happen without it being an alcoholic venue. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
Yeah, my name is David Stewart. I live at 1919 48th Street. My front door looks right out on that tower that you see on the building. And across the street from my front door, it still says Benjamin Franklin Junior High School in cement. And I've lived there. I moved into the area when the church was fading away, and then it moved away. So I've lived there in the prime years. I didn't live there when it was a school, and I'm concerned about the introduction of alcohol into the neighborhood. I've got nothing against alcohol. I've got some beer in my refrigerator at home. I've got a bottle of white Zinfandel, but I know how to deal with it. And not everybody in Des Moines knows how to deal with it. I grew up in Highland Park. My parents and grandparents lived on Columbia, just 3 blocks north of the building that at that time was Warren G. Harding Junior High School. And I attended that school for 10 years because back in the day before World War II, it was also a sailor elementary school in the West Wing along Cambridge. So I've lived in at 1919 48th Street for 6 years. And my main concern, I know that it needs to be developed into something other than an empty building, but my concern is about the introduction of alcohol into a residential neighborhood, other than what I've got in my refrigerator. And that's my main concern. The rest, you know, it sounds private elementary, intermediate school, event space with rental for the existing gymnasium, small and large auditoriums, fine. Even a 30 guest room boutique hotel, but 5 separate taverns, a craft brewery with production for on-sale consumption. How would you like to have that right across the street from your front door? Those of you who are on this committee or whatever it is, consider that. Would you like to have that developed right across the street from your front door? I just got my tax, what do you call it, thing in the mail last week, and the evaluation on my home has gone up. I'm willing to pay more taxes, but not if I'm going to have to live across the street from someplace that's going to get really noisy. I got in the bad habit of falling down, without benefit of alcohol, by the way. Starting in January of 2017, 5 major falls, and I spent 6.5 months in hospitals and nursing homes. And I tell you, after I got home on October 31st of 2017, after 6.5 months in a nursing home, I never appreciated that word that's spelled H-O-M-E as much as I do now. And I just hope that I'm going to be able to live there until Hamilton's funeral home hauls me away.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
I'm Harold Reinbold. I live at 1909 48th Street. I live right across the street. We've lived there since '68. And we were there when it was a junior high. Then I went to church. I'm concerned about the neighborhood as far as the development of it. Ever since they put the parking lot in, we never had water in our basement for 7 years, and then they put the parking lot in. We've had water in our basement every year. We put some pumps and what have you in there, and we have a lot of flooding out on the streets. Also, I'm a little concerned about Franklin I know people are, got 30 rooms are going to be there and people are going to eat there. You're going to be coming down 63rd Street off the freeway, 63rd and Franklin to 48th and Franklin is not really much of a street. I don't think it's been worked on for years. I'm also concerned about the traffic. We have a lot of traffic now with the stoplight, and we need a stoplight on Hickman. We also need something at 48th and Franklin. There's so many people that do not, they think they're in the residential area and they crash all the time. Joanne and I were out walking the other morning. The sun was blinding a guy and he just blew right through the stop sign and people were honking at him and everything. I'm also concerned about, I don't like to see 5 taverns there, the alcohol. I have no problem with if you have a restaurant that you get a drink or two, but that's my concerns. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
My name is Tom Compiano, and I live in West Des Moines, Iowa, 301 47th Street, and I am the majority owner of Franklin Court Apartments. And that's right there, right across the street. We have 182 units. We're full. We usually are full because we keep our prices down, and we have a lot of older people, lots of older people there. And I have been involved 20 years ago with Seven Flags Event Center, and I was on the wrong side of that deal because we were having these concerts. And I can tell you the neighbors did not like it because these bands were real loud and a lot of drinking going on, and it was not something that they liked in their neighborhood. I can tell you that. And then a few years later, they put a bar behind my house in West Des Moines on 50th. And, you know, all the homes along there, they just, you'd have to listen to it. I mean, you'd have to listen to it. You didn't want to go out in your back porch because it was so noisy. Now, we've got a lot of units right along there. And I am not objecting to a hotel or a restaurant or a bar. Please don't do an outside thing. Don't do an outside terrace because there's just too many people that live there. And they don't want to listen to that. I can tell you, I can get a list of names from the people that live along that side, and they're not going to be happy. And I don't want to lose good tenants because they can't stand the noise. And just so, it's the outside thing that scares me, to have something outside, because I've been there, done that, and I really think will hurt. And it is a quiet neighborhood. It's, you know, development is great as long as it's in the right place. But like I say, I don't have any objection to a hotel, a restaurant, a school, you know, any of that. But outside drinking and having a great time, that's great, but don't do it, you know, don't do it by these people's house where they live. And I bet you there's 90 apartments along that side. So, thank you.
All right, thank you. Anyone else wish to express concerns? All right, seeing none, Mr. Young, this is your opportunity to come back and maybe address some of the issues, or your team, whomever is going to represent you.
Lindley Kent, Newman Munson again, 418 6th Avenue. Just going to flip back to the plan so we can reference that as we're kind of talking through these. So we've heard about a number of concerns: noise, light, the alcohol sales in bars, as well as stormwater. So talking about the noise, we kind of talked a little bit about that, about where we're placing things on the site, trying to be cognizant of that. Also, you know, a lot of the noise concerns is talking about taverns, right? And we went over, that we have one dedicated bar. It's actually on the second floor inside the building. There's no exterior space of that. Everything else is associated with a restaurant, or it's for concessions for the actual event spaces. So I think it would be a misconception to think about that outdoor space as a outdoor bar. It's really going to function, like we said, as a family-friendly atmosphere. We have that play area there. That is not the intent. And it's also placed on Franklin Avenue, which, across the street, those are commercial properties there. And it's right in the middle of the block, trying to do our best to keep that away from the residential area. As far as light goes, that's one of the conditions in this PUD approval is to make sure everything's cut off. We're not throwing light additionally to the neighbors. We're not really changing any of the parking that's currently there. That'll stay as is. If that needs to change to meet these conditions, that may happen. But we're not adding additional light into the neighbors' windows. As far as the bars go, we talked about again that we only have the one dedicated bar. The 3 other locations, so the cafe, the restaurant, we have 2 restaurants inside the building, and that cafe, those would have an alcohol sale component. I think there's plenty of restaurants around that you're not worried about your children being around, even if they are selling alcohol, that sort of thing. And really, as a percentage of this project, it's a tiny percentage of space that we're allocating to this sort of thing. It's a very large project, and we're talking 1 classroom as a bar. The alcohol sales, kind of talking about not having it as part of the project, I think that, that's a huge revenue generator, getting people to come there. I think that would really hurt the project not having it. The alcohol permit and license is a whole separate process as well that we still have to apply for and all of that. So, some of these conversations can carry on as well as it's a condition in this PUD approval that if, it's not taken care of properly, that could be revoked. You guys talked about that this is all under one ownership as well. These are not multiple tavern owners. These aren't really taverns at all. So I really wanted to squash the idea of 5 taverns, right? We have 1 classroom-sized bar in this entire project.
And may I ask this, because I didn't hear the woman who's the director of the Montessori school mention any concerns have they expressed to you by operating the Montessori school?
Currently, we haven't had any of those concerns. That's the first time I'm hearing of it tonight. Obviously, as we move forward with this, we'd have to make sure all those codes and regulations are met. So, absolutely, if that's a problem, then we'll have to deal with that down the road. But I'm not aware of any, and obviously, there are a number of mixed use aspects of this building. So sometimes there's certain ways to separate things, and we're of course going to make this school very secure, just like any school that we do. So at this point, we're not really concerned about that.
The other thing is we're also going to have offices in this building as well. So obviously their concern would be similar. I think I would go back to. Sorry. I think the reason why we added this image and then the following image, this is from the Kennedy School, you can see in terms of scale and density, there's residential housing around it. The program aspects that we mentioned are around it. So the alcohol, obviously businesses will be cognizant of that, and the management would be cognizant of the idea of the impact of alcohol within office facilities too. The other thing is most of the events that you would think would be in the evenings and daytime operations, so there's a separation in terms of time and occupancy of those spaces too. And again, the McMenamins is a great example in terms of a project having very similar program aspects. And I have not, Lindley's actually been to the McMenamin facility.
Also been there.
I've been to Portland, but not to the facility, but I was there 20, 25 years ago. And some of the areas where these developments have happened has actually helped revitalize those neighborhoods too. And if you walk around and even do a Google Street View, you will see the density of the neighborhood compared to even on Franklin and 48th. It's much higher. So
And can either of you address the water?
Yep, I was just going to get to that. And actually just tying to what Khalid was saying as well, I think, property values we actually see likely increasing. I think this will add a huge amenity to the neighborhood, and we think people will want to be by that, not the other direction. As far as the stormwater goes, we're actually not adding any additional hardscape to the project. We're actually removing some hardscape. So all of those patio areas, that garden area, we talked about the kind of crunchy pathways, we're not adding sidewalks. So that wouldn't contribute to any additional stormwater runoff. And actually, we're planning a bioswale back here. So that area on the bottom of the screen, just underneath all that parking there, and then kind of one quadrant in towards the building, towards that garden there, those are planned to be bioswale areas, which currently there's some sort of detention, but we're planning on improving upon that.
How are you? I see there's a courtyard, at least one on the plan view here. Are there two? And how are you planning on using those?
The courtyard spaces, there are 3 of those. And so you'll see the one that's kind of shown in gray with the little kind of teal boxes. That is where...
You can put in that paper.
This isn't turned on. This is using the computer.
Okay, sorry.
The cursor works.
Oh,
yep.
yeah.
So that there is where we're planning the soaking pools, similar to what we showed in the Kennedy School. The smaller one with the tree that's still currently there is planned to be kind of the more Zen garden, and then the larger one we're planning on creating a space that is a secure school play area for that school, as well as some social kind of gathering space.
The quiet area. Yes. I'm thinking for parties.
Could be.
Any other? You have something? Oh. I just want to ask you. I think in your presentation you mentioned parking staff. What will their responsibilities be, and how will that? Several times there's been mentioned in the traffic study. If you could address that.
Yeah, I'm actually not familiar with the traffic study. I'm not sure. I think Tiva can come up and talk to that a little bit. But there were not any comments from traffic, at least on this initial PUD pass through. So that's definitely a good sign there. As far as the parking staff goes, when you think about events downtown, you have somebody that's manning, parking lots, directing people, what spot to go to, taking, potentially money. I don't know if they'd be charging to park here or not, but there would be staff there that would be able to direct traffic, ensure that people are not parking where they're not supposed to be parking, on 48th or Franklin, that sort of thing, 49th, any of the surrounding streets.
Okay.
I can speak to the traffic study, which is required, as you all know, and it models out full build out, all the things that you see. It models what that impact will be. That study came back with not recommending that the developer be responsible for making any changes, that the current roadway system can handle all of that traffic. And it even made hint to maybe the light at Hickman may not even be needed. And the city engineer had concurred with that study. So, and there was, obviously a large church here not that long ago that did have to be able to move people in and out at regular intervals as well. And did you touch on the parking staff?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So
Yep. She answered that. Okay, thank you. Any other questions? All right, thank you very much. I think I will close the public hearing and commission. Oh, you're the Montessori woman,
Montessori
right?
school.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to see if you had any additional questions.
I think she handled it very well.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Our
thank
day
you.
ends at 2:45, so if we were going until midnight and would have more concerns, we've become quite a little neighborhood school quickly, and the parents understand the vision for the project and where it was headed and are also bought into this community. So thank you.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Jackie, I'd like
Lena?
to mention, just for the benefit of the audience, so your recommendation tonight will be forwarded to the City Council. That's anticipated April 22nd. And then the public hearing, there will be another public hearing where the council will make the final decision. That should be scheduled for May 6th in the council chambers at City Hall. It won't be in this location, it will be at City Hall. The developer will be notified of that information and his consultant as well. If you do have questions about the date or time of that hearing, you can contact CD staff. Thank you.
While you're there, Glenna, I just want to make sure we're absolutely So one of the recommendations is that the plan is due to come back for the final development plan. So what you're describing now is the timeline that will occur after this meeting, and then there will be the council meeting, and then let's say that the plan is approved. Is this the next step then, the final development plan that comes back to us, or is that the same timeline?
No, I think I honestly don't know. I would defer to Mike for that, but I think it would follow the city council hearing because there's no reason to come back to P&Z if, for example, it's denied. So
exactly, right.
So, and just to clarify, those are tentative dates you're throwing out for things going to council. They need to talk to the clerk's office to confirm the dates of those hearings. We had recently on the Des Moines University request, we'd stated some dates, and then it ended up being actually a hearing set for mid-April. And so that can happen. So I guess I would just advise people to check with the city clerk's office on any meeting dates and hearing dates.
That's a completely fair point. We've had 2 developers request continuances for months in the last 2 months. So that's definitely a fair point. You'll need to probably look at the city council agendas to determine what date the hearing will be set for. But our schedule, if it stays on schedule, would be April 22nd for council to receive the recommendation, and then May 6th for the hearing. Thank you.
All right. So I will close the public hearing. And Commissioner, what is your pleasure?
Well, let me lead off. I've lived in Beaverdale for 14 years. I live 3 blocks from the project. I've had friends and neighbors on both sides of the issue weighing in, and I consider this an important issue, and I want to use a balancing act. I do think this is, some of the comments are overblown regarding crime in the neighborhood. There's no more crime in Beaverdale than there is in most areas of Des Moines. Crime is part of living in America. It's not limited to urban areas. Secondly, I think Franklin Avenue needs help. A lot of empty buildings are there. There's also a methadone clinic there. I think we need to move in the right direction to increase the economic activity in favor of adding the for-profit business that's actually will be paying taxes, so that's to benefit. Also address the issue of alcohol. Over at Urbandale Avenue and Beaver Avenue, there are several alcohol establishments, and people are still investing in homes. Property values are increasing, and I know a personal friend of mine has purchased and torn down an old house and built a $300,000 plus house that's within 300 feet of several alcohol establishments at that intersection. I believe that this would be a benefit. I understand there's concerns, and I acknowledge that, and I think we should accept the department and staff recommendation, and I would not exclude 15 because of I would like to address the concerns of anyone who's concerned about alcohol and noise and traffic. So I make a motion that we adopt the staff recommendation as written.
All right. It has been moved that staff recommend approval of the request to amend Plan Des Moines, creating our tomorrow future land designation from neighborhood mixed use to community mixed use. That's part B. Oh, I forgot part A is recommending that the proposed rezoning be found not in conformance with the existing Plan Des Moines land use designation, and then of course part B, and then part C is recommending approval of the request to rezone the property from limited C1 neighborhood commercial to PUD, which is a planned unit development. And then part D, the staff recommends approval of Franklin Junior High PUD conceptual plan subject to conditions 1 through 15. I believe we've gone through those thoroughly, but if anyone has any questions about any of those, speak now. Otherwise, I'm going to call for the vote. All right. Yeah.
I have a question for Mike real quick. Mike, help me understand. My understanding is in terms of alcohol sales, I'll have to get a special use permit regardless. They're near a school. There's always things they need to do, right?
They will not have to get a conditional use permit because it's a PUD zoning. So that's, I mean, for example, we've had a couple of C-stores that have come in for planned unit developments. They don't have to meet the separation distance for commercial business in that instance. They still would have to get an alcohol license from the city council. So that's a state function that the city council issues those licenses. And then the PUD condition includes what is typically allowed under Board of Adjustment review, where the zoning enforcement officer can take the issue back to the Board of Adjustment on the conditional use if it becomes a nuisance. Similarly, we wrote into there a condition that they could initiate a legislative reconsideration of the use in the future on the PUD.
Thanks. I just want to make a few statements or comments. As long as this is, I appreciate everyone coming tonight and all these thoughts. I too am a Beaverdale resident, been there 17 years, just around the corner from 41st Place. And one of the things that's super dynamic about many of our neighborhoods in Des Moines is the walkability to different types of places to eat, entertain, have fun, etc. And so for me, this is actually a very exciting project. We need to continue to revitalize our neighborhoods. They need to continue to flourish. I agree. You know, what little I know of what Franklin used to be, it's obviously not that any longer. But there is an opportunity here to maybe jumpstart that in a positive way. I'm very excited about this. I also would agree that number 15 should stay in. I do think it should come back. Hopefully at that time there can be a little bit more explanation from the team about where the uses are planned to be within the building. It's really not real clear right now. I think I know where you guys are heading. And I also appreciate, and I think you can spend a little bit more time on explaining in a little greater detail how the uses will flow out to the, whether that be south, along Franklin, because I think Franklin does want to be kind of invigorated and wants to have outdoor life, as well as what you're envisioning more for that east flow and that space out there. And because I do respect and appreciate the folks that are directly across the street. And I think you guys are thinking that way, but that can probably be explained more. And as you get into these other steps, I'd encourage you to, get into that a little deeper. But anyway, those are my thoughts.
Right. And I don't often express my support before the vote, but I too am going to support the recommendation as is. I am an expatriate from the Beaverdale neighborhood. I went to Hillis Elementary School, and I went to Franklin Junior High when it was the junior high. And so often those of us who went during my time, bemoaned, the fact that when we were there, the neighborhood was thriving, and, it was a fun place to go to school, and I remember all the stories that they are describing. And I think that when you live in Des Moines, no matter where you live, you always want your childhood neighborhood, to be thriving and to be successful. And so it's exciting to see this project. So I will be supporting the recommendation too. Ready for a vote? All those in favor? All right, got it. Were there any abstentions? I didn't notice, or nays. All right, thank you very much, everyone who came, and we hope that you will continue to follow the progress. And I guess we need a break. Yes, how about 3?
3 minutes.
Okay, 3 minutes. We're taking a 3-minute break to clear the room.
I think we're going to get a tour. I've never been there.
I'm involved in everything. Okay. I'm a lawyer.
gavel. There you go.
Okay, break's over.
Makes sense. It looks like it'll be really great.
We want to get home before all you guys go to Portland.
How do we get a tour of the building?
There next weekend.
Oh, really?
My cousin has Down syndrome.
No.
And,
Or,
yeah, no, it's.
Yep.
And she's like 23 now.
Perfect.
So we got over it a long time ago. It was sad.
Thank
And when is your tour of Portland?
So she's doing this.
When is my tour?
called Miss
Okay.
Amazing.
Okay.
So it's like all these women
question.
with,
You know, talked with anybody at the
like they get to compete in this pageant.
So Jason, are you ready?
I know, it's really fun. And it's at Franklin Junior High, and I was like,
Excuse me, Jason, do you know where Glenna is? Can we go ahead?
Yeah, as long as we have a quorum number.
No one's gonna be
Jeff out of
I
here.
doubt it.
Don't
Yeah.
swear.
Yeah.
So,
Here we go.
we don't mean to boot you out, but
right.
we have one more thing.
We do have.
I imagine, yeah.
Very independent. Which we like.
All right, we are going to reconvene, and we thank those who have been waiting patiently for item number 10. Item number 10.
So our last item, the site is located on Ingersoll Avenue. Aerial identifying the subject property, Ingersoll, south side, MLK to the west. Photograph of the property. It's a bank project. It's under renovation. Notice map. Site plan. As noted in the staff report, we previously approved a staff level site plan that included the underground of utilities so the applicant could move forward knowing that they would need more time to come back to you with tonight's request, which is to defer the requirement of undergrounding the utilities. As staff, we are recommending denial. We believe it should be done at the time of the project as other projects. We did provide with you in the report some language. I believe you should have received a copy of corrected language for the staff report. We apologize for that. We just wanted to clarify a couple things, but mostly clarify that we're talking about.
Just a minute, Jason, everybody received the corrected version.
Thank you. If everybody's seen it, I won't go into a lot of detail on it, but just to reiterate that staff is recommending denial. Happy to answer any questions.
All right. Any questions for Jason? Seeing none, applicant, would like to step forward. Thank you for being patient.
I don't think I've ever been last after something that long before. So Angie Fonku with Christensen Development, 215 East 3rd, Suite 300. Our client is Lincoln Savings Bank, and of course everybody wants their utilities undergrounded, but after talking with Mid-American, the thing that's going to trigger the utilities on Ingersoll is when Midas moves out at the corner of MLK and Ingersoll, which I believe you guys, where's the have here?
On the corner.
So their main power comes from right here on the corner. And so they're not going to know where to set their transformers or how they're running down Ingersoll until something different happens on Midas. So I have my phone that may be still working, but on that south side of Ingersoll, there are 10 above ground power lines. And with us undergrounding, we'd only get rid of one. So my client and we don't believe that we should underground right now because it doesn't really do any good for them or the streetscape in general. And one of the conditions in here was if you guys should, whatever, approve the denial or whatever you guys do, that
grant the deferral.
Grant the, yes, there you go. That we would escrow for the funds. And my only comment to that is with the client being the bank, they would prefer to do a letter of credit. And I did talk to them today, and they can do a letter of credit for any duration that you would like them to do a letter of credit. Otherwise, we agree to the conditions that we would underground as soon as the property to the west did. My only comment would be we would like a letter of credit instead of escrow since they are a lending institution. So, and I can show you all the power lines, or I think Doug has it on his phone as well.
Instead of an escrow, come this way, right?
So you can see this big mess here. That's what they need to clean up, but they can't until something happens different on that corner. And then as you come down Ingersoll on the south side, they are all above ground power lines all the way down to 18th Street. So the only one we would be getting rid of
Right there.
is right here. That's the only one we'd get rid of by doing this. So, and it's about a $50,000 cost to do it, and it doesn't gain much for the streetscape at all.
Did you want to add something? Okay, just using your phone. All right, so Commission, any questions for the applicant?
Go to, yeah. Okay.
Greg's down there, do you guys have a question? I thought, it looks like you were.
We're ordering dinner right now?
We're sharing. Sorry.
You mean breakfast?
Focus.
Okay.
Oh, I have a question for Michael. Michael, how come we can't have a group of property owners put the utilities underground all at one time?
Well, there's nothing triggering the requirement for them to do it, so that typically we get through the site plan review is when we ask for those undergroundings to occur, so.
Longer be a democracy.
And
it'd be purely voluntary without a site plan, and I don't see anybody volunteering to do it. So, as a matter of fact, most people are trying not to do it. So.
And to add to that, the building just to the east of us that you can't see very well here, but they went in for a building permit just to do some exterior improvements and a remodel on the inside for a new tenant. And since they didn't come through for a site plan, they don't have to bury the utilities. So in our mind, and that's the way it works, and that's fine, but in our mind, now that's another 10 years out or more before they're gonna come through and try to bury their utilities directly on the other side of us. So, and I don't disagree, it looks better. In this case, it just doesn't make any sense for us or our client to do this.
Great.
So are you okay with us, if we would grant a deferral, are you okay with the staff's language in that deferral?
I am. The only thing I would request is that we did a letter of credit instead of the escrow. Okay. Yeah. Right. Yep. And I think some of these, I talked to Mike earlier, I think we had to submit 2 site plans, so I think some of these comments are already taken care of as far as the understory trees versus overstory trees. But they had to deny our first site plan, and so we will get that all worked out. Yes, we agree with that.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, seeing none, doesn't look like anyone will ask any questions.
No one else wants to be here.
Remaining. So I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing. Commission, what is your preference?
Can I ask a real quick question to staff? This seems like the first time I've seen the idea of depositing funds in escrow. Is that new? I mean, I can see where it's coming from. I just didn't know.
We've done it on a couple of projects. Okay. If you recall, the Kingsway Cathedral up in Sherman Hill, they wanted to, the neighborhood hasn't done their lighting design for the neighborhood, so we authorized a escrow in that situation for funds to go in for future lighting changes. We've talked with a couple of other projects in the Sherman Hill neighborhood that same thing. The neighborhood needs to come up with their lighting plan before we extend the lighting. So the developers, in order to be able to move forward, we're saying put money in escrow equivalent to what you would do today, be required to do today. And then when the neighborhood gets their plan together, then we'll put those funds towards installing what the neighborhood plan calls for. Those are 2 instances. We also did an escrow agreement on Ingersoll further to the west, and that was with Rohr's development on the pedestrian crossing light at 23rd and Ingersoll. They did an escrow for that, and then it was up for 50% of the cost in that instance. So we've used it before on several projects. It seems to work pretty well.
Okay, and is a letter of credit sufficient? Will that be acceptable?
So right, thank you. Regarding the escrow agreements, we've done those that I've seen from either 5 or we're proposing 10 years on one. And the letter of credit typically, I feel like there's an exception in this case because it is a bank and they've said that they can do for an indefinite duration. So I think I would ask as a staff member that you put a long duration on that. For an individual or an individual developer, I don't believe that we would find that sufficient because letters of credit typically can be revoked at any time or have a very limited duration.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Motion?
Just to ask her, how long did you say, or indefinite?
You'd say a definite period of time.
Indefinite good enough?
If CD staff is aware of a time frame, again, an example we just used was 10 years, I think that would be sufficient. If there's no inkling that this is going to be done in 10 years, then it would need to be longer. Angie might be able to explain what the bank could do in terms of that letter.
Yeah, you guys can put a limit on it. I think 5 or 10 years would be fine. We all hope that Midas is gone in the next 5 to 10 years, which will force us to do this, which is what we want to clean that up. So I think if you could do 5 or 10, whatever you guys are comfortable with, but the bank, I mean, without you controlling Midas or me controlling Midas, it's hard to say. So I think 10 years would definitely be safe, but I will listen to whatever you guys would
How about
like.
if we suggest a minimum of 10 years and then it could be renewed? And
Yeah.
if it's not done in 10 years, we bring it back to the commission and you guys
Okay.
propose another one. Would that work?
Then I'd make a motion that we
Grant the deferral.
grant the deferral, subject to all the things in the staff recommendation, except we would accept a 10-year letter of credit in lieu of the escrow.
Did you want to say minimum?
Minimum, well, it can be 10 years, but we could renew it.
Okay. Any questions about the motion? All right, all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Wow. Okay, I think everybody voted. So that concludes, thank you again for your extreme patience, and we'll see you in Portland. At this time, that concludes our agenda items. Are there any reports, Mike, from staff?
Ask Tyler, he'd be the one.
Okay, any committee reports from commission? Seeing none, we're adjourned.
Up fast.